Marvel. Immortal. Can I obtain the ability of the others when they hit me? Chapter 1. Click. An iron shackle was worn on the hand of a 13-year-old boy, and his slender figure was pushed forward by two heavily armed soldiers. The lonely shadow is reflected in the corridor of the underground base. Su Chen's childish face was vaguely covered with a hint of fear. He didn't want to go. However, the detained soldier kept pushing and shoving behind him, and his sturdy physique pushed him forward so easily. Su Chen gritted his teeth, and his undeveloped body struggled desperately. Boy, be honest with me. The soldiers on both sides immediately set up the arms of the boy and walked towards the laboratory at the end of the corridor. This is an experimental base specializing in the study of mutants. Brain slices, body dissections, and various illegal human experiments are carried out here. After all, people really want to study the genetic mystery of mutants. In the past half-month, Su Chen had seen how many figures were taken out of the cell, but they never came back. He doesn't want to die. But with his limbs shackled, Su Chen's struggles didn't help at all when he was young and weak. Soon, his body was taken into a closed laboratory. Buckle. Under the instructions of the experimenter in a white coat, Su Chen's hands and feet were tied to an experiment platform, his waist and even his neck were tightly bound by a restraint belt, and the whole person lay flat on the platform, as if waiting. Lambs slaughtered are generally immobile. Outside the one-way glass in the experiment room, General Marcus in a military uniform said excitedly, "This is the number 5162. That guy with extraordinary healing." "Yes, General," a doctor beside him said excitedly, "even Wolverine's healing ability can't be compared with him. The cell activity of this guy is terrible. It can be said that this is our key to immortality." Immortality. Dr. Marcus's complexion became less calm. Dr. White did not say anything else. This young man with extraordinary healing ability is not a mutant, because he does not have the iconic X gene of mutants. On the contrary, his genes are very special, weird and changeable, just like mutation and evolution all the time. Immortal, infinite evolution. To be honest, Dr. White was also taken aback by his bold assumptions. How does this sound like an omnipotent god? Intuition told him that this young man was very dangerous, but he couldn't restrain the curiosity in his heart for the mysterious genes that kept mutating. He wants to crack it, study it, and get the answer completely from it. Just let me cut your head and get the answer from it. Dr. White walked in, and his vicious words lingered in Su Chen's ears. Do not. Su Chen began to struggle more and more violently. Because he saw the doctors in white coats all around took up a scalpel. Craniotomy. These ghosts are going to craniote themselves. He is about to be craniotomy. I don't want to die. Su Chen's heart began to scream. He thought of his mother who died of illness. He promised that she must live well with his sister, be healthy and live a long life. In the future, he will find a gentle daughter-in-law and give birth. Fat boy. As a result, a catastrophe fell on him, to destroy the oath he had sworn before his mother died. Do not. I want to live, Su Chen yelled. At this moment, an invisible wave rippled out of his mind, and everything around him was dominated by an invisible wave of thought power. I saw everything in the laboratory floating in the air inexplicably. Number 5162 has shown a new ability, suspicious of thinking power. For a while, the experimenter panicked inexplicably. Hurry up and get a strong anesthetic. A nurse immediately grabbed a flying needle from the air tremblingly. Su Chen witnessed this scene, and his clear eyes flushed suddenly. He doesn't want to get an injection. He is most afraid of injections. Get out of here, get out of me. Su Chen roared. Boom. As if saying the law, the nurse holding the needle tightly, as well as the surrounding lab coat experimenters, suffered a terrifying repulsion in an instant. With a bang, each of them slammed into it. On the wall behind. Many people fainted and fainted on the spot. Su Chen's eyes were red. He didn't realize that his genes were undergoing a terrifying mutation and evolution at this moment. At this moment, he just wanted to live well. I want to live, I want to keep my promise. Strong belief turned into motivation. Hiss. The binding strap tightly bound to Su Chen's limbs and waist was completely torn apart by his thin body. His physical strength has skyrocketed inexplicably, and his thin physique, who has not received much nutrition for more than 10 days, has gradually filled his muscle lines. Su Chen didn't know what happened to him. He just wants to live. Boom. The door of the experiment room was opened in this way, and several fully armed soldiers broke into the door directly. After learning that the subject was completely out of control, they did not hesitate to pull the trigger in their hands. Whoosh! The bullet from the fully automatic rifle hit Su Chen's body very accurately, and one bullet hit the center of his forehead. But in less than a second, it was as if it had been placed upside down. The bullets that pierced through the body were spit out from Su Chen's body, and the piercing wounds healed in an instant, with all traces of injury, cannot tell. Self-healing ability. The soldier sneered, and suddenly switched to the firing mode. The bullets of the fully automatic rifle kept shooting Su Chen's head like this. He wanted to see how the other party's head was completely healed. Ding ding ding. The bullets fired at close range hit Su Chen's skin. At this moment, they didn't penetrate through his body surface, but directly flew out. The soldier was dumbfounded. It took less than a few seconds to fire twice, but the second bullet couldn't penetrate his skin. It was as if the opponent had evolved steel-like skin in this short period of time, directly adapting to the impact of the bullet. He is evolving. The doctor in white, who was slumped on the ground, was hit by the fluctuations in his thoughts and turned pale, but at this time he was very excited and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, the infinite mutation gene is making him evolve at a rapid pace, heaven. Ah, let us applaud the birth of God. Ha ha ha. Dr. White was laughing loudly. As a Frankenstein, he looked at Su Chen with eyes full of light, as if he had seen some rare treasure. From the beginning of the research on Su Chen's cells, he discovered that under the extraordinary and huge activity, there are genetic molecules that are constantly mutating. Subject to the fact that the sample is too small, there is not much room for experimental proof. However, there is a very bold conjecture in his mind, that is, Su Chen's body will directly evolve the corresponding resistance when subjected to strong external stimulation. For example, under the burning of a flame environment, the constantly mutated genes will evolve fire resistance. In the cold and freezing environment, the evolutionary genes will make the body mutate frost resistance. The scene in front of him just confirmed this point. The skin of the young man whose bullet penetrated had evolved resistance in less than a second, and the strength of his skin had suddenly increased so much that the bullet could no longer penetrate. Inexplicably, the doctor in white suddenly thought of a sentence: he would not be defeated by the same move a second time. The soldiers who did not believe in evil kept pulling the trigger. Da-da. Fiery fireworks bloomed on the muzzle, and a round of bullets continued to shoot at the boy in front of him. Ding ding. It's a pity that one round of bullets hit Su Chen's body one after another, and all of them flew out without exception. They can't even imagine that a person's skin is so strong. Su Chen looked at the soldier in front of him with an angry face. Die. A sullen word came out of Su Chen's mouth. Boom. Under his hysterical expression, the reality around him began to distort, and all the soldiers who came from the entrance of the laboratory in front of him turned pale. They covered their hearts and suddenly screamed in pain. What? They only felt that the heart in their body was being squeezed fiercely by an invisible giant hand, and with a bang, the whole person's heart was completely squeezed by this invisible force. Puff! The figures of a group of soldiers collapsed like this. At the moment they were dying, their expressions were full of fear when they looked at the young man in front of them, as if they had seen a demon god. It's amazing. It's more powerful than reading motivation. You have directly rewritten reality. Dr. White, who collapsed to the ground, explained with excitement. Noisy. Su Chen's eyes looked at him all of a sudden, and the hideous face of the opponent holding a scalpel about to open his skull appeared in his mind, and an uncontrollable anger spurted from the bottom of his heart. You die to me too. His words came out. Invisible fluctuations swept through reality again, and the head of the doctor in white exploded like a tattered watermelon, and red blood sprayed all over a ceiling. I want to go home. I want to live well. No one can stop me. Su Chen's eyes grew colder, and the thin figure walked off the experimental platform. He touched his forehead, without a trace of wounds, and suddenly realized that his indestructible physique was still working. It's just that the supernatural powers that emerged one after another made him clearly aware of a brand new change in his body. He could not discern the principle of change. At this moment, he just wanted to live. Boom. The door of the laboratory was directly closed at this moment, and the steam valve tens of centimeters thick was enough to trap any strong mutant-capable person. In order to avoid the occurrence of experimental accidents, the ventilation ducts of the experiment rooms are equipped with poisonous mist devices. Hiss. Soon, a green mist sprayed from the ventilation ducts and quickly filled the entire experiment room, which was enough to poison an adult elephant quickly in 1 second. Su Chen frowned, his consciousness suddenly became blurred, and the whole person felt extremely tired, as if he was about to fall. But within a second, the effect of neurological palsy began to weaken rapidly. So it is. Su Chen's 13-year-old head immediately had a clear understanding that the influence exerted on him by the outside world can quickly stimulate him to quickly evolve new abilities. To be precise, his immortal body also contains an infinitely evolving mutant gene. Under the stimulus of the outside world, the direction of evolution has been found in a direction, and new antagonistic abilities have suddenly emerged. In just a few minutes, I seem to have demonstrated the power of thinking, rewriting reality, and being of steel. This is an ability that hasn't been shown in the past, and it's obviously a newcomer. Su Chen suddenly felt that he had become smarter, as if his intelligence had been greatly inspired. In order to cope with more and more abilities in his body, he felt that he needed to generalize, so as to deal with more and more abilities in his body. Just like the child prodigy geniuses on TV, they can construct their own memory palace in their minds, and every book they have read is kept in this palace. In the same way, the genius Sherlock on TV can build a temple of thinking and manage his memory in a scientific and orderly manner. Based on the novels he had read, Su Chen began to construct a system of his own, allowing it to unconsciously summarize the changes in the genes in his body. It's like antitoxic plus 10, antitoxic plus 10, antitoxic plus 10. The host's physique has been exempted from the nerve gas, and it will not invade the poison. The changes of genes in the body to external stimuli are summed up vividly by the system constructed by Su Chen. Good. Su Chen is very satisfied. So he looked at the locked laboratory door in front of him. After the surging power of thought surged out, the steam valve in front of him suddenly sank and collapsed. Kang! The sour steel twisting sound exploded, and the steam valve in front of him collapsed completely under an invisible force. Hiss! There was a burst of mist under the entire evaporation gate valve tens of centimeters wide, and another surging power of thought swept through. With a loud noise, the entire gate collapsed and a huge gap large enough to accommodate one person entered and exited. No, this guy is going out. Call all the guards in the base. Number 5162 is completely out of control. The sound of panic spread throughout the entire large-scale experimental base. The harsh siren sounded even more, and General Marcus hurriedly left, dispatching the security personnel of the entire laboratory base to suppress it. Then Su Chen, who put on a white coat, walked out of the broken door of the experimental room. After going through the incident, his childish face has become somewhat indifferent, stern, not close to any human feelings, and vaguely, there is still a cold murderous intent emerging. Su Chen wants to live. He promised his dead mother to live well. Anyone who prevents him from going out of the laboratory, all go to hell. Looking at the figures of soldiers emerging from the end of the corridor, Su Chen's indifferent and stubborn face was full of killing intent. He no longer cares about moral good and evil. Now he has only one thought. Anyone who intercepts him will have to die. Boom! One by one bullets flew from the end of the corridor. This time the bullet head became sharper, but it was capable of piercing armor. Obviously, in order to deal with the steel-like skin, these people took countermeasures. Su Chen's pupils contracted slightly, he raised his right hand, and a surging invisible wave condensed in front of him. Music momentum. He asked the system to summarize this invisible power fluctuation into the motivation of thought. Under the action of the force of thought, the sharp bullets are like sinking into the mud, unable to move in the air, and finally hovering in front of Su Chen. Let's go back. As Su Chen's right hand swayed slightly, the hovering bullets swept out, flying to the figure at the end of the corridor, making loud noises, and the thick body armor could not stop the armor-piercing bullets. In the blink of an eye, all the figures in front of him fell to the ground. It's all your fault. Su Chen's stubborn and childish face looked at the corpse under the ground, but he didn't feel any sickness. Anyone who blocks, you have to die. Boom! The figures of soldiers rushing in continuously fluttered out in a surging thought force, and the indifferent Su Chen even floated his feet, relying on the memory of the experimental base in the past, and ran towards the gate of the entire experimental base. The ear-piercing alarm device kept flashing red, and the noisy sound made Su Chen extremely uncomfortable. Under one of his thoughts, the alarm device hanging from the ceiling and the closed-circuit television all exploded. A door suddenly lowered in the corridor in front of him, as if a mechanism device separated various sections of the experimental base. But this is not difficult for Su Chen. Click. Under the more violent surging thought power fluctuations, the metal gate blocking in front of him burst open. Nian momentum +1. Nian momentum +1. The system prompts are a good way to visualize the evolution of gene mutations. Su Chen also understood very well that when he uses every supernatural ability, he will be tempered and grown, and he will become more comfortable with it. Obviously, this is an infinitely evolving mutant gene at play. That's it. Just under the collapse of the gate, a very tall and stalwart figure came into Su Chen's eyes. Whoosh! In an instant, his figure flew like a wiping arrow, and the figure staggered past, and the sharp blade in his hand directly pierced Su Chen's waist. Puff! Blood spurted out, and the body of steel that was difficult to penetrate by bullets was completely pierced by the opponent's blade. This guy who came from the assault was obviously extremely powerful. Unfortunately, the splashing blood seemed to be drawn by the position, and quickly flew back to Su Chen's wound, and healed so quickly in less than a second. What? The passing figure was dumbfounded. He frowned, and once again pierced Su Chen with the bone blade extending from his hand. Kang! This time, enough to penetrate any metal steel plate, Edmund alloy, which is known to be indestructible, actually broke a sharp corner with a bang when it touched the opponent's body. Impossible! He was dumbfounded, and he could not believe that the all-inclusive Amon's claws broke apart. You must know that he could still cut through the opponent's skin in the last second, but why within a few seconds, the surface of the opponent's skin grew rapidly and became indestructible. Steel body +5. Steel body +5. Su Chen's brain system clearly summarized the genetic changes quickly. The opponent who struck suddenly had weapons that were sharper than bullets, but it was a pity that all these external stimuli made Su Chen's physique even more terrifying. Roll! Su Chen scolded coldly. In an instant, the attacking figure suddenly slammed into the back wall like a cannonball. The strong impact caused the back wall to directly collapse, and the whole person turned into a blood man. Su Chen was about to turn around and leave, but he glanced at the other side hesitantly, but he didn't expect that the other side would start to heal himself. It's not only you who have the ability to heal yourself in this world. The enemy who fell on his knees sneered, and he slowly stood up. Su Chen frowned. The childish 13-year-old face was full of anger. He was very angry. Why did these guys stop him? Why couldn't these guys just die? For a while, his emotions were a little out of control. Prior to this, the changes in reality caused by hysterical out-of-control emotions were summarized by the system as rewriting reality. This is a very terrifying force. Why can't you just die? In his anger, Su Chen unintentionally triggered the power to rewrite reality. In the blink of an eye, the figure in front of him suddenly broke apart with his limbs and head, as well as the Edmund alloy bone implanted in his body. The black powder dissipated in the air. Rewrite reality +1. Rewrite reality +5. In the use of abilities, Su Chen's horror ability involving reality modification was immediately strengthened. He didn't stay there any longer, so he continued to run towards the gate of the experimental base in the distance. The intercepted figure followed suit. It's just that under Su Chen's horrifying motivational fluctuations, the guards of these experimental bases are no opponents at all. They are like being attacked by an air cannon. Land. Su Chen's aloof figure just jumped over their bodies. Let me send more X-weapons to catch that guy. In the control room of this super large experimental base, General Marcus, who rushed in hastily, was very angry. Although there have been many experimental accidents in which mutants fled in the past, compared to this time, it made him feel very tricky. But at the same time he was furious, he also felt a sense of joy. Looking at the running figure in the surveillance video, General Marcus appreciates it more and more. OMG. He thought he had acquired a supernatural healing ability, an undead who possessed more extraordinary healing ability than Wolverine. As a result, he didn't expect the other party to burst out so many superpowers when his emotions were out of control. The intangible power of thought spread in the air. With a word of anger, the unknown terrorist ability that can take the lives of others. That steel skin that can withstand bullets. Not only that, according to the analysis of the laboratory personnel, this guy also has extraordinary evolutionary ability. In just an instant, his steel skin ability was once again transformed by the stimulation of Edmund alloy. The Edmund alloy, which was known as indestructible, broke down unexpectedly. OMG, such a terrifying existence is even more terrifying than the X-weapon. Be sure to give me control of him. I want to get him, I must get him. General Marcus gritted his teeth and roared. But compared to Marcus, who was extremely excited, the rest of the personnel in the control room felt extremely worried. The corridor barriers set up along the way were all demolished by violence. The security personnel sent there were wiped out. An X-weapon with high hopes stimulated the growth of the other party. But soon, an even more desperate news came, and the life signal fluctuations that tracked each X-weapon disappeared without a trace. They are dead. The X-weapons that were just dispatched are dead. The staff in the control room panicked immediately. This is the top security force for the entire experimental base. What frightened them even more was that a restraint that could easily fight against mutants was also directly ineffective. Something's wrong. The poisonous mist X, which can inhibit the mutants' ability, has no effect at all. In the past, the most effective way to deal with mutants was to suppress the X-poisonous mist of mutant X genes. However, the young figure of the surveillance video is very relaxed and swaying his motivation, and the security personnel who came from the intruder is like a toy, easily dying. It was as if the opponent was not a mutant at all, or had quickly evolved resistance to poisonous fog. In less than a second, the entire surveillance video equipment was directly crushed by the other party. Although the opponent's image was lost, the control room personnel could still track Su Chen's specific direction with the life signal fluctuations. After a while, the opponent would be able to walk out of the entire base directly. Not good. The other party suddenly turned around, as if coming towards our control room. Someone screamed in panic. The life signals captured by the tracking actually changed the target. Did you lose your way or kill towards them? General Marcus's complexion paled suddenly. Prepare the Darkhawk fighter. He stood up directly, surrounded by a few cruel soldiers, and walked out of the control room. At this moment, he has clearly realized that all the cards under his hand have been played, and there is no effective means to restrain the opponent in his hand. General Marcus cursed secretly, and when he noticed the other party's actions, he suddenly realized that this guy's retaliatory nature was a bit strong. So this boy must not stay. Although it is a pity that such an experimental material has lost the secret key to immortality, but there is no way. A person who cannot be controlled is the future enemy. It must be completely killed in the earliest stage. Activate the self-detonation device. General Marcus said coldly. This super-large experimental base standing on the snowy field is equipped with a nuclear explosion self-destructing device. After it is activated, it is enough to obliterate all the evidence of evil here. Marcus has no doubts about the power of it. Just because the nuclear equivalent erupts in the middle, it is enough to wipe out any known creature. Okay, goodbye. A few figures that walked out of the secret road just got on the Darkhawk gunship on the roof, and the corresponding pilot flew into the air with General Marcus in this way. Looking down, you can see a white building standing on the deserted snowfield. After half a minute, the self-detonation device will end the countdown and explode completely. At that time, a bright mushroom cloud will rise here, and the surrounding snowfields will also completely collapse. Poor boy, I heard that you still have a younger sister. I really look forward to what surprises your younger sister will give me. General Marcus sneered. After half a minute, the self-detonation device was activated, and the experimental building located on the snowy field released a terrifying light group. The terrifying wave of destruction destroyed everything by itself, and the surrounding snowy field was completely wiped out. A shocking mushroom cloud just soared up, demonstrating its power. Boom! The earth trembled, and under the violent earthquake fluctuations, even the surrounding snowfields began to collapse in large areas. The power of the nuclear explosion is very terrifying. The first one to bear the brunt is to completely turn the entire building standing on the snowy field into a dark cloud. Under the rising mushroom cloud landscape, even the helicopter personnel far away feel a thrilling beauty inexplicably. Boy, fight with me. General Marcus, who put on his goggles, sneered. The nuclear equivalent of the self-detonation device broke out in the middle, enough to obliterate any existence in the world. Even a person with self-healing ability could not recover under such an instant bombardment. It's a pity that I worked so hard to gather the mutants. In this world, there are many experimental institutions specializing in the research of mutants, except for the famous General William Stryker. It is him, General Marcus. Experimental data cannot be brought out in time, but the black boxes of the central server are all preserved. I don't know if the black boxes, placed underground, can withstand this wave of shock. General Marcus is a little worried. The black box of an aviation plane is to allow future generations to understand what happened to the crashed plane at the time after the plane crash, and what operational errors occurred in the cockpit of the plane personnel. It records all the data at the time, so the entire black box is very resistant. Shock. The black box of the super-large experimental base naturally kept a variety of obscure experimental data samples, recording in real time what problems the laboratory encountered at that time, so that it was forced to activate the self-detonation device. Therefore, the black box is an important thing that General Marcus needs to obtain. Otherwise, the nuclear explosion is inexplicably started, and he does not have enough reason to report on his work. And he also needs this black box data to support his next action, which is to arrest the out-of-control sister of Su Chen on a global scale. Don't blame me, but blame your poor brother for rebelling against me, and this is the end of rebelling against me. General Marcus smiled coldly. In fact, there is one thing that General Marcus thought wrong. Su Chen's escaped figure suddenly turned back and did not rush to the gate of the laboratory base for the first time. It was not because he was looking for the murderer behind the control room to avenge him, but because he suddenly remembered the variants that were being held in the cell. Human figure. There are big and small, men and women, and they are all poor people who have been imprisoned. I have been imprisoned for more than half a month. Although I have not spoken to other prisoners, I still feel a little empathetic when watching their figures disappear one by one. I think they also have their own family members, and they must also have the same cuteness as their sisters. Give up your loved ones. Su Chen moved with compassion at once. They are all poor people, it's better to take them to escape from here. Thinking of his mother's childhood education to be a good person, Su Chen's heart became very firm, and he felt warm for his next action. As a result, General Marcus, who was judged to have killed himself, activated the self-detonation device in a hurry. Pain. After being completely swallowed by the terrifying energy, Su Chen only felt a long-lost pain from his body nerves. Under the erosion of the nuclear explosion, the skin of his whole body gradually disintegrated and shattered, but at the same time, his blood and blood billions of trillions of cells jumped for joy at this moment, and the whales swallowed and attacked all around. Horrible energy. 1 second, maybe 2 seconds. Su Chen's consciousness returned, and at the same time, he could no longer feel any pain. He lowered his head and spread his right hand, only to find that his disintegrated skin was healed again, just like looking back in time. The broken body was once again intact, even if the surrounding area still has nuclear energy. Steel body plus 500. Steel body plus 500. The constructed system clearly informs him of his genetic transformation. The continuously evolving genetic codes seemed to have found the direction of evolution, eagerly swallowing the majestic energy that swept from all around. 1 inch, 2 inches, or even tens of square meters, the surrounding energy area of hundreds of square meters began to be attracted to and swallowed by one's own body, just like a black hole was formed in one's own body, greedily absorbing external energy. The new ability, energy manipulation, has been generated. The complex gene chain has generated brand new changes, and the constructed system is a good way to express this change in a simple and clear way. Su Chen understood at this moment that he could absorb or release any form of energy. Ever since, he lifted the tip of his right finger, and all forms of energy around him gathered and poured into his fingers. Soon, the majestic nuclear explosion light began to dissipate, and the terrifying mushroom cloud also directly collapsed, and even the light began to be distorted when swallowed by a whale that looked like a black hole. In the end, Su Chen saw that he was in a huge pit of thousands of square meters, and all the building structures a few seconds ago were completely vanished. The plan fell through. The plan to rescue others just failed. The entire cell area disappeared without a trace, and even the bones of the prisoners could not be found. Why are good people imprisoned, sent to be slaughtered as poor lambs, and why bad people can do whatever they want? Su Chen's shoulders shrugged a little, his words trembled, and tears flashed in his eyes. In the end, his stubborn and childish face gradually became indifferent, and his expression of pity gradually rushed towards the endless killing intent. He gradually raised his head and looked into the distance. Under Su Chen's pupils, he could easily see that one was moving. A gunship going away. Go to hell. Su Chen's fingertips suddenly flashed a terrifying light, which turned into a terrifying beam and rushed towards the sky. More than 10 seconds ago, the same sight fell in the eyes of the personnel inside the Dark Oak gunship. General Marcus was a little stunned, because the mushroom cloud rising from far away began to collapse, and the bright light caused by the nuclear explosion on the ground disappeared suddenly. What happened? His heart suddenly beat violently, because an unknown answer appeared in his mind. Could it be that boy who caused this scene? Impossible. That kid is absolutely impossible to survive. No one can survive in the heart of a nuclear explosion. Everyone in the gunship was taken aback. It was only more than 10 seconds before the self-detonation device erupted, but now, the mushroom cloud that was rising had instantly dissipated. From the perspective of everyone's bird's-eye view, they saw a super huge crater on the snowy field. Like a bottomless crater. It's not right, there seems to be a figure there. A soldier wearing a tactical eyepiece roared, and a figure suddenly appeared in the pit under the cover of the smoke and the energy shock wave. It's him. General Marcus turned pale with fright. At this moment, he was no longer surprised by Su Chen's wonderful performance. After all, his extraordinary healing power and the ability to constantly evolve and evolve were all within his imagination. But what is the concept now? A person who was able to stay in the center of a nuclear explosion without any harm was far beyond the limit of his imagination. This does not belong to the category of human beings or even creatures at all. This is a devil, a monster. Suddenly, General Marcus remembered Dr. White's hysterical words before his death. Let's applaud the birth of God. God, soon. With the straight eyes of General Marcus, a bright light gleamed in the pit in the distance. It was Su Chen who raised his right hand, and the light bursting from his fingertips instantly magnified and turned into a thick and incomparable golden beam of light, which suddenly tore through the sky, blasted through the sky, and directly blasted the distant one. An aerial helicopter is listed as the target. Do not. All the personnel, including General Marcus, roared. It's a pity that the bright light that rushed into the sky swallowed their figure and the entire fighter plane. Under the solid beam of energy, even the X-weapon with the healing ability on the fighter plane's upper body can only be transformed in an instant. For nothing. Boom. The orange-red flame light just bloomed, appearing in the sky like a firework. The bad guys should all die. Why do you kill so many people and think about leaving? Su Chen's stubborn face was telling the indifferent killing intent. He withdrew his right hand. With energy manipulation, he can swallow and release all forms of energy from the outside world, including nuclear energy, and all the kinetic energy shocks that attack him can be absorbed by him. It's getting stronger. Su Chen squeezed his right hand, and a surging force continued to rise from the palm of his hand. Under the baptism of the nuclear explosion just now, the whole person's physique has been strengthened again, and besides it has also brought more enormous physical strength. Susan. After successfully escaping from the imprisoned cage, Su Chen is now full of his sister's figure. After the death of his mother, he could only depend on his sister. But an accident separated them. I want to go back. Su Chen stepped forward and gradually walked out of the pit. He promised his mother that he would take his sister to live, grow up healthy and live a long life. He wants to live, and I have to rush back to my sister. But where exactly is this place? After walking out of the bottomless pit, Su Chen looked at the endless snowy field around him. The whole eyes were a white tone. Snowflakes were falling, and the world was vast. 13-year-old Su Chen couldn't tell where this snowy landform was located. He can only walk 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow in the snow. Half an hour, 1 hour. The surrounding world is still white and vast, and the endless snowy landscape is like a world prison. The thriving immortal body can't feel the cold, because the cold outside stimulation makes his body full of freezing resistance. However, Su Chen's heart was cold, and his stubborn face wanted to collapse. Where exactly is this place? He felt that he could not go out. Surrounded by the energy of his body, his long black hair hung upside down, his feet got off the snow, and he moved forward, but a few hours later, it was still a white color, and no one around him could be seen. The experimental base was actually built in an unknown snowfield, so that he could hardly get out of this endless snowfield on his own feet. Su Chen's heart was out of control. After his mother died of illness, he has vowed that he will not cry anymore, and will be a strong man with his sister to support the whole day. He can't cry, but the unfamiliar snowy environment around him seemed to mock how ridiculous his behavior of wanting to see his relatives was. He doesn't even know where it is. He can't even find a figure. Even the world is bullying itself. Can't you let me see a figure? Su Chen's emotions suddenly got out of control. Less than a second. The colors of the world change instantly, and the surrounding tone is no longer a piece of white, but a piece of colorfulness. At this moment, Su Chen only felt that his eyes were blurred for a moment, and he was in a city under neon lights, with the figures of people walking through the streets. The out-of-control emotions indirectly triggered his mysterious ability to rewrite reality. Su Chen was a little surprised by the changes in front of him. In less than a second, he was located in an endless snowfield. In the next second, he just appeared under a city alley under a neon light. Rewrite reality. He immediately realized that it was this ability that caused the change in the environment. In the experiment room, he was completely emotionally out of control when he was bound, so much that he deprived many people of their lives just by words. The word, roll, caused all the surrounding figures to be thrown away. The word, death, is enough to make the body no longer exist. This is the power of rewriting reality, mysterious and unpredictable, ethereal and intangible, yet possessing terrifying lethality, as well as a huge power that cannot be captured. In the emotional out of control just now, Su Chen wanted to see the crowded city, so he completely triggered the ability to rewrite reality. Su Chen suddenly disappeared in the city under neon lights. He walked out of the lane, looking curiously at the surrounding tall buildings. Towering skyscrapers rise from the ground, and the neon lights outside the surface of the building completely illuminate the city at night. The city has not only changed, even the sky has changed. 13-year-old Su Chen naturally knew that this was a change brought about by geography, and he quickly figured out why he rewritten reality and came to the city in front of him. This is downtown Manhattan. Su Chen gritted his teeth and said bitterly. He recalled the dream he told his mother on the side of the sick bed. He dreamed of a top-notch apartment in Manhattan, driving the best car, becoming an upper-class person, giving his mother the best treatment, and having a happy life. For the rest of your life. But now he came to this city so abruptly for the first time, but he was alone and alone. The bitterness gradually dilutes the novelty, and Su Chen now only wants to find his sister. She is not in this city. As they parted, the two said goodbye to a town on the west coast. Unfortunately, the arrested self let Susan, who has the ability to shuttle in space, escape by herself. Susan must not dare to go back to her hometown. As for the vicious aunts and relatives, the 11-year-old Susan was dissatisfied and would not go to flee. Thinking of Susan's ability to penetrate everything, Su Chen's uneasiness was finally flattened out. But what can he use to get to her side? Communication method? No. Can only rely on the power of rewrite reality to bring her here. Su Chen carefully studied it and felt that only the ability under his control could fulfill his wish. It's just that this ability is not something I can control at will. Su Chen gritted his teeth. No matter how he wants his sister to bring him here, or go to where his sister is now, he can't make this ability work. The ethereal ability to rewrite reality is very difficult to control. The previous series of behaviors were only caused by the explosion of oneself out of control. If you want to dominate this ability as you like, your current self is obviously not enough. I need to focus on this ability. Su Chen sighed secretly. Under the Immortal Constitution, there is the genetic potential of unlimited evolution, but the direction of evolution is originally disordered and uncontrollable, and the new abilities that suddenly emerge are entirely caused by disorderly mutations of genes. Without stimulus from the outside world, the current Su Chen could not control the evolution direction of his genes in the micro world. As for the system, That's not the golden finger in the novel. It doesn't have any ability. It's just that Su Chen imitated the behavior of a genius detective in constructing a memory palace in his mind, thus constructing a system of recording genetic changes in his mind. Maybe it can only be done if strong emotions are out of control. Su Chen is a little frustrated. He is not the moody women on TV. How can he suddenly lose control of his emotions? And I am afraid it may not work. Gulong. At this time, a more realistic question came, and he was groaning with hunger. Looking at the late-night snack shop on the street in the distance, Su Chen's sharper nose caught the very sweet smell, and Su Chen felt his taste buds continue to slobber. So hungry. But he was penniless, not even a dime. Go grab it. Su Chen just feels that there is a bewitching word in his mind. Go steal it, the world can't stop you at all. But looking at the hard-working little girl in the shop, Su Chen only felt that his conscience was condemned. They are all poor people. Su Chen shook his head. It was so sad that a girl who might be younger than herself had to work all night in the shop. My mother used to teach herself to have empathy and be a good person. Su Chen suddenly realized that his wanton snatching behavior was still not good. Hey, kid. At this moment, a word came from not far away, and saw a teenager in a denim sweater walking over. You're hungry, you don't look very good. At first glance, you look like you have run away from home. He was holding a bag of donuts in his hand, and directly stuffed such a bag of food into Su Chen's arms. Su Chen's complexion was a little confused, and the other party's familiar performance did make him a little uncomfortable, but his clothes were damaged and looked like a child who had run away from home. He didn't know how to deal with it. Eat, you are welcome, I also ran away from home a few years ago. I know how you feel now. Don't worry, there are still a lot of these donuts. Don't worry that I won't be able to finish it. This self-acquaintance boy looks like his elder brother. At this time, another word came from the depths of the dark alleyway. Hey, Matthew, what's going on? Come and watch the show. I see, Matthew responded. Watch the show. Su Chen was a little startled. Boy, you don't know, the stripper shows in nightclubs are only open in secret shops in various lanes. You can't miss this. Let's check it out before going home. Matthew invited it directly. Striptease show. Su Chen had watched some clips on restricted TV channels, but his sister Susan switched the channel with a serious face. Su Chen was also very interested in the hormones who were in the growth stage. Su Chen always feels a little warm in his heart when he thinks that this self-acquainted big brother is so kind and giving him donuts, and it is hard to refuse. There are still good people in this world. He was full of joy and followed this elder brother for a few steps. Only, the gradually stronger body has also brought about an improvement in perception. Not only the sense of smell, but also the ability of hearing has been strengthened. As a result, he heard some detailed words deep in the tunnel. In the next second, Su Chen's childish face became more and more cold, and a cold shadow filled his expression. His footsteps stopped directly. A pair of cold eyes with killing intent looked towards the back in front of him like this. The world is not worth it. Can you tell me what is human organ trafficking? After the young Su Chen walked out of the experimental base, he was somewhat discouraged. A single shadow only descended on the lanes of the city, and met a kind-hearted brother. The hot donuts, and even the restricted level show outlined by the other party, made Su Chen extremely happy and longing. There are still good people. But in the next second, the warmth that Su Chen held in his heart disappeared without a trace. A nuclear explosion is like a tempering. Under the strong stimulation, not only the physical strength becomes more and more terrifying, but also the terrifying perception that comes with it. A keen sense of smell allows him to capture the sweet smell of late-night snacks on the streets in the distance. And the same sensitive hearing ability suddenly allowed him to capture the whispering words of strangers in the laneway. There are no secret shops deep in the aisle, nor a stripper show. But, an illegal private hospital clinic. 6,000 United States dollars, the organs of that child's body are yours. Single quote. The stranger who had called the eldest brother just now was whispering. And in the store hidden in the night, there was also a rough and cold tone, and the two responded in this way, and reached an agreement in whispers. A lost lamb like Su Chen is so ignorant that he is deeply trapped in Matthew's deceit. If you are an incompetent wanderer, I am afraid it will inevitably come to a tragic ending. Unfortunately. What are you saying? Matthew turned around, but his expression was extremely natural. Although he couldn't know how the other party saw through the scam, the difference in power brought about by the age difference between the two made him not panicked at all. On the contrary, his eyes watched Su Chen with a bit of playfulness, just like watching an insect trapped in a spider web. Struggling only makes the other person die faster. But within a short while, his expression suddenly solidified, his hands bitterly covered his neck, and his complexion suddenly became red like pig liver. Do not. Matthew's heart was roaring. At this moment, he only felt that his neck was confined by an invisible palm. Less than a second, a sharp pain came from the heart. What? His painful words swallowed in his throat like this, and it was difficult for him to say a single bitter word. What made him even more desperate was that his heart was exactly the same, and he was squeezed by an invisible hand that could not be seen or touched. Right. Pain. It's so painful. Matthew looked at Su Chen's eyes gradually becoming more and more horrified, as if he saw a demon. He wanted to beg for mercy, but he couldn't say a word. Matthew knelt down on his knees, with a face like pig liver. He stretched his arms forward and tried to pull the opponent out, eager to beg for mercy, but this action angered Su Chen. He didn't want to be so touched by a shameless and despicable bad guy. It will make him feel extremely sick. So, go to hell. Su Chen's indifferent figure jumped over his body and walked towards the depths of the tunnel. As for Matthew, he collapsed completely, his neck twisted like a twist, and the heart inside the person was completely squeezed and turned into a pool of blood. Matthew, you. At this time, the bargaining figure walked out of the private clinic. Although the lights in the lane were dim, it was still very eye-catching for such a big man to fall to the ground. Even more bizarre is that the kid who was tricked came forward just like that. His complexion changed, but he suddenly felt his feet directly off the ground. Hey, what's the matter? He yelled in surprise, his hands and feet struggling in the air, like a drowning man, looking very funny. Su Chen, who walked out of the shadows, looked at the other person indifferently. The donut in his arms had already been thrown on the ground by him. At this moment, he was full of murderous intent. Boom! The figure floating in the sky suddenly swelled up like a balloon, as if someone was fighting desperately from his stomach, and the whole person's physique became more and more spherical. Do not! He couldn't help but yelled in panic. Next second, boom! The human body balloon exploded completely, and a bloody rain of blood was splashed down. Su Chen, who was supported by the power of mind, just finished the understatement. A dull noise came from a doorman in the laneway. Apparently the personnel inside heard it and closed the door in panic. The flustered footsteps, the sound of guns being loaded, and the heavy breathing were all clearly and unmistakably heard by the sensitive Su Chen through a door. He raised his right hand forward, and an invisible wave of thought power rippled out like this. The door in front of him was like a thin cardboard, instantly torn apart and sawdust flying. Give me a shot. The owner of the private clinic, who had been waiting for this scene a long time ago, raised the Shaw bullet gun in his hand, and squeezed the trigger with his right hand, but the gun flame never bloomed. Click! The entire Shaw bullet gun disintegrated completely, as if a superb firearms master dismantled the entire gun body. Depend on. The owner of the private clinic was panicked. In a panic, he directly took up a scalpel at his hand, and his figure kept moving backwards, shouting in horror, begging for mercy, and trying to get forgiveness and forgiveness. Su Chen didn't want to hear the specific words clearly. His gaze was all attracted by the scalpel held tightly by the other party. At this moment, he suddenly recalled the scenes in the experiment room. At that time, the doctor in white was bragging to use the scalpel to dissect his head. Su Chen's indifferent expression suddenly burst into anger when he touched the scene. Inexplicably, the power of rewriting reality was suddenly activated, and the owner of the black clinic in front of him ushered in a whole body collapse. Every inch of skin and every inch of flesh and blood in his body was transformed into the simplest cell molecules and dissipated into the air. Life and death are determined by one word, and the appearance of these people completely dispelled the trace of goodwill in Su Chen's heart. Humans in this world seemed to be hopeless. Under the power of rewriting reality, it was like erasing a person's figure with an eraser, and the black doctor in front of him disappeared into the air, turning into a handful of gray mist. Ding! The scalpel held in panic just fell from the air, making a crisp sound. Life and death are determined in one word. The poor guy has no bones left, and the world has evaporated. The figure of Su Chen walked into this dark clinic opened in the lane. Although he was young, he had heard the rumors of the betrayal of human organs. In order to change a mobile phone to sell his kidney organs, it can only be said that others are stupid and out of reach. But trying to deceive a person's body organs for no reason is simply unforgivable, and it is difficult to obtain a trace of forgiveness. Scum like this shouldn't live in this world, Su Chen scolded. He looked at the entire black clinic. The square space was full of debris, an operating table was placed in the middle, and Sen Lang's surgical tools were placed on both sides. The walls are covered with X-rays and color pictures. The keen sense of smell also caught the smell of blood coming from the compartment. Su Chen frowned. I'm afraid this dark clinic has already done something to other people. What a scum. For a time, 13-year-old Su Chen felt a bit of disgust for the city he had longed for since childhood. Money. Su Chen looked at the stack of banknotes in the drawer, but he didn't have a trace of shame about this kind of ill-gotten wealth. After going through so many things, he has realized that the world of tenderness is finally full of rules of the weak and the strong. Without the genetic potential of infinite evolution, then his pitiful immortal physique will probably be reduced to a sample in the experimental base of others. Even if you pass this level, if you don't have enough powerful ability, you will be fooled by the sinister routines in the city if you are ignorant and young. The world is sinister, unpredictable. Su Chen put a full stack of tens of thousands of dollars in cash into his trouser pocket. Then, he put on a coat to cover some tattered clothes in the underground, and his slender figure walked out of this dark clinic and walked towards the street outside the lane. With the money, he first went to a shopping mall off the street. Su Chen clearly needs a new set of clothes. Soon, under his aesthetic, he wore a black hoodie and a pair of loose slacks on his lower body. After washing his face, Su Chen looked very handsome underneath his slightly childish face, with a soft long black hair dangling down. Some young and mature scents are just a pair of clear black and white eyes showing a cold meaning. The impersonal indifference radiates out. The waitress wanted to tease this handsome kid who came alone, but she didn't dare to say anything when she saw the cold look of the other person. After buying the order, Su Chen just walked out of the mall. Of course, he did not forget to buy himself a new mobile phone. He put on a black hood and headphones on both ears. His angular, handsome face showed a trace of seriousness. He looked at the phone in his hand intently. If Su Chen held a skateboard on his right arm, it would be like a street mess. Cool boy. Even so, his appearance on the street has attracted the attention of many girls, and the rate of turning back is extremely high. So handsome, much more than the stunned handsome guys in our school. The focused look and the indifferent complexion are so cool. Some of the ladies passing by talked in a low voice. On the streets of Manhattan under the neon lights, there are already many party animals going to the nightclub to play. Looking at the figure of such a lonely cool boy, there are always some ladies who are eager to try. Little brother, is it the age to drink? Would you like my sister to take you to play? A beautiful white-collar worker in a white professional shirt stepped forward to hook up. Su Chen shook his head indifferently, amplified the volume of the phone, and left without anyone else. What a ruthless kid. The beautiful white-collar worker turned around and left in a disappointment. Looking for the capture of the smell, Su Chen's footsteps gradually accelerated, and soon his figure appeared outside a shop. Boss, here's a bag of donuts. The cash in his hand was quickly exchanged for a bag of donut delicacies. As for the food delivered by the vicious person just now, he had long been thrown on the ground, and he didn't even want to eat an extra piece. In the empty restaurant, Su Chen's figure sat on a soft seat, swallowing delicious donuts in his mouth. At this moment, this was actually his happiest time in most of the past half a month. Before that, he couldn't even breathe a trace of fresh air. Hunger is quickly filled. Su Chen's top priority is to arrange his next life and goals. This is the fine tradition he inherited from his mother. The things that need to be dealt with each day should be divided into time, clearly organized, and try to complete the academic and life problems within the time period. First, she is naturally her younger sister. Second, revenge. He lost his contact information. He was located in Manhattan on the east coast of North America, a full continent from the west coast. There was no communication method, no identification document, or even an adult. He could not find a convenient way to go back. And his past house is definitely not safe, and Susan will show up nearby without any reason. When I thought of my sister Susan blinking her eyes and riding the smell of a sly little fox, Su Chen's indifferent face gradually showed a smile. This little guy who used to give him a headache is not so easy to get caught. In the dark, Su Chen always felt that his sister was not in any danger. This is a kind of intuition, and it is also an unknown meaning on the spiritual level. It is like when the other party has an accident, it will inevitably arouse one's own alertness. Su Chen remembered that when his mother died of illness, the sense of alertness he had sensed in advance made him extremely uncomfortable and anxious, and finally watched his relatives pass away in silence and helplessness. He shook his head, hiding these painful memories in his mind. So it's revenge. Su Chen's complexion was grim again. In fact, after he was arrested, the base he was sent to at the first moment was not a large-scale experimental base on a snowy field. After less than 2 days, he was transferred to another experimental base. As for the arrest of himself and his sister, and the owner of the first experimental base, Su Chen remembers his name very well. General Stryker. Even the search bar of the mobile web page can clearly and unambiguously write down the brilliant resume of the General Schwan. William Stryker. This big name can be said to be a big name, with a reputation all over the world. The most important achievement was to offend the entire mutant race. The extremely representative Magneto King Eric hated him deeply. Even the conservative mutant Professor Charles had no small opinions on him. Through the search of the mobile phone, Su Chen directly learned about the mutant race from the related entry of General Stryker. According to what Professor Charles has always said, that is that every human body may have an X gene. The difference is that the X gene of the mutant is completely expressed, which is why an ordinary couple gives birth to mutant children. I am not a mutant. Su Chen frowned slightly, which is why he was suddenly transferred to another experimental base. But for mutants with supernatural powers, he still has a hint of goodwill, perhaps because of empathy. After all, they have also suffered unfair oppression. Boom. At this moment, a bottle of lemon soda was placed on his desk, and there was a clear sound. Hey, how can anyone patronize a bag of donuts without feeling thirsty? A girl with 2 golden ponytails in front of her joked. She was sitting across from the bar just now, and she was very interested in such a handsome little boy who loves donuts. Mindy's delicate face was full of curiosity, and said, "It's so late now, aren't you going home yet? Have you finished your homework? No need to go to class tomorrow." After the soul asked 3 times, Su Chen was speechless for a while. It's not that her topic completely shocked her. But, please, you are not too old. Who did you learn from the old-fashioned tone? HMPH, dissatisfied, when my sister was as old as you, I did more than one big thing, and I swept the whole city from heaven to earth. Mindy looked at Su Chen's speechless face and gestured immediately. Not to mention that this head swing does seem to have some fighting skills, enough to bluff people. This cup of lemon tea is for you. Remember to go home as soon as you finish drinking. Mindy didn't pay much attention to the indifferent young man, and he turned around and left, a pair of golden ponytails dangling under his small and exquisite lowly figure. It looked a little cute. For a while, Su Chen thought of his sister. Half an hour passed. Su Chen, who had solved the hunger problem, walked out of the restaurant. It was late at night. Now he was looking for a place to stay, but a real problem was oncoming. That's the question of how to stay. Ordinary hotels require ID cards, and some irregular residences are even more difficult to find, and a minor child may not be welcome. Su Chen thought about it, but felt that the night accommodation could be put aside. The immortal physique originally means that the cell activity is extremely full, and the surging life-healing power always allows him to maintain sufficient physical strength at all times. Even how mental exhaustion can relieve this problem, and the body after the nuclear explosion stimulates. Su Chen didn't feel tired for the time being. The most important thing is that I want to find out how to find the whereabouts of my loved ones as soon as possible. Boom. A steel pewter bounced out of Su Chen's right hand, rose into the air, and then slowly fell back, but when it accurately landed in the palm of his hand, the entire coin disappeared without a trace. In less than a second, it was like a trick, and another brand new coin appeared in the palm of nowhere. Then, boom, there was another crisp sound, which was bounced by Su Chen. At this moment, the entire coin disappeared completely in midair. The invisible fluctuations of rewriting reality are simply difficult to capture, and the invisible power just makes a coin appear in Su Chen's hand. This is not a dazzling technique. It is that Su Chen himself is using the ability to rewrite reality as much as possible. Infinitely evolving genes are indeed disorderly mutations. It's just that past experience has also told Su Chen that under external stimuli, or even excessive use of this ability, the direction of genetic evolution will find an attraction. Generally speaking, only when emotions are out of control can the power of completely rewriting reality be used too much. However, if a coin is constantly illusioned and disillusioned like this, appearing out of thin air, and directly obliterating it in reality, it is natural that there is no need to rely on changes in emotions. Rewrite reality +1. Rewrite reality +1. More practice can evolve. The constructed system records the information of gene transformation very well. Walking down the night street, Su Chen wears a black hood, a black windbreaker, and earphones. A coin in his hand is constantly flipping and jumping, illusion and disillusionment. The mysterious, slender and thin figure walks so arrogantly, right? Going around all the way, watching the night scenery brought by downtown Manhattan. It's just that the beautiful life that I dreamed of a few years ago is gradually fading in my mind. If you and the people around you can't grasp the life and death, how will your life unfold afterwards? He wants to become stronger. Only the strong can crush all stumbling blocks. At this moment, there was a blast of sparks from the roadway not far away, and the bullets that burst under the muffler were very muffled. Su Chen's sensitive hearing captured all this. His indifferent face did not show a trace of movement. After experiencing human organ trafficking, he saw a lot of robberies while shopping along the way. There is too much filth hidden behind the bustling city. This also gave him a slight change in his understanding of the world. His mother has been teaching him to be good, and he used to agree very much. But the series of encounters over the past half-month has made him feel a little numb. In the bottom of his heart, he also decided whether to take revenge. On the one hand, he longed for a peaceful life and longed to return to the ordinary warm family of the past. On the other hand, he couldn't calm down the resentment in his heart. Why should he suffer so many hardships for no reason, and why the bad guys can still get away with it, and unscrupulously hunt and kill people like him? Su Chen's heart made waves. He was thinking. Next second, Su Chen's footsteps stopped. His eyes were still looking at the laneway not far away, and he saw a girl wearing a black cloak and leather jacket with purple hair constantly leaping among the enemies. With a samurai sword in one hand and a butterfly sword in the other, several people who committed the crime in the future were killed one after another. Su Chen didn't know that this woman's nickname was Super Killer. All he knows is that this woman wearing a purple wig and a black suit is the girl who gave herself a glass of lemonade in the restaurant before. What a coincidence. Su Chen frowned, but relying on the instinct of fighting in the dark, he realized that the girl was going to suffer next. Picture. Super Kill Girl. Boom. A bullet burst out of the barrel under the silencer, and the stumbling lorry figure had no time to hide in the air. With a bang, her figure lost its balance and fell from the air. But what is unexpected is that the black leather coat of this lowly girl has bullets inlaid outside. Ho! With an angry grunt, the lowly girl who fell to the ground shot a butterfly knife backhand. This precise throwing technique was jaw-dropping. In an instant, it hit the three figures in the throat. Kill directly. For a while, the alleyway was filled with suit figures, and only a murderous little lowly was left. Su Chen, of course, did not know the super killer girl who has recently gained fame in Manhattan. As for whether this lowly girl punishes evil and promotes good, or gang fires, Su Chen subconsciously feels that it has nothing to do with him. He is just a passerby. Su Chen took a look, then turned and left. That kid just now. The super killing girl Mindy looked at the slender and thin back not far away, and frowned. She glanced at the watch. It was a full midnight after 12 o'clock. The little kid who was eating the donut just now turned out to be. Haven't returned home yet. Putting on a purple hair set and a suit, Mindy was not afraid of revealing his identity, and threatened not far away, "Hey, kid, what are you looking at? Don't you give me home to find your parents. She was purely teasing and wanted to meet the young and mature guy. Old-fashioned, indifferent without saying a word, I am not afraid that you will pee. After speaking, Mindy also gestured to the samurai sword in his hand. The cold edge under the moonlight was dripping with blood, and the scene before him was indeed very scary. What? But within the next second, the super killer's complexion changed, and she quickly shouted, "Hey, kid, get away, pay attention to the car in front." Su Chen turned his head when he heard the other party's words, and at this moment, a white car was so full of the accelerator, like a running wild horse, wrapped in a terrifying momentum, just rushing straight into it. Don't think too much, this car that suddenly comes at full speed must be a trouble for finding super killing women. Coincidentally, Su Chen's figure was stopped right in the center. For the underworld Emperor Jinhe, what an innocent person could tell. His subordinates were even more unscrupulous about this. In order to retaliate against the super killing girl, they just stepped on the gas pedal regardless of whether they were on the road or ignored the pedestrians on the road. They just rushed toward the lane. It can be so rampant. Su Chen's indifferent eyes looked at this Mercedes-Benz car like this, and the car lights in the night shone directly, covering his thin figure completely. The driver of the car with his hands holding the steering wheel was full of excitement. In his eyes, the boy in front of him seemed completely frightened and motionless, almost like a second stunned boy. At this moment, he had expected that the boy's figure would be thrown away. Hundreds of meters, blood spilled over the sky. But why is this guy's eyes full of mockery? Die. In a whisper. Boom. There was a dull loud noise that resounded between heaven and earth. Suddenly, it was like an air cannon falling out of thin air, and it was like being beaten by an invisible hammer. The white car in front of the Mercedes-Benz turned into a pool of discus, and the entire ground was directly sunken. The depth of the meter is as if it was hit by a meteorite. The super killer Mindy opened her eyes wide, and her eyes under the tactical blindfold were completely filled with shock. She was dumbfounded. Dare to feel that this lonely and indifferent cool boy is a superpower. Is it a mutant? This is too strong. What are you looking at? You don't want to go home for me to find your parents. Su Chen gave this sentence back to the stunned super killer. Mindy's delicate face blushed suddenly, but the loud bang just now made the car sirens in the whole block sound, and the lights of the houses in the dark were constantly turned on. Obviously, he wanted to see what was happening outside. Don't stay longer. In a loss of consciousness, she even found that the lonely figure of the other party had disappeared into the dark night. Sooner or later, I will ask you for a cup of lemon tea. Obviously, he invited people to drink before, and Mindy also felt that he was a thief in order to find the place. After dozens of minutes, Mindy's compact lowly figure has come to her safe house. The black leather jacket that could withstand the impact of the bullet was replaced, and after the purple wig was removed, a golden shoulder-length short hair fell down, and the super killer put the weapons in her hands on the workbench one by one. In the entire safe house in front of them, the cabinets on the three walls are full of guns of various types. A super girl who combines a master of guns and a master of fighting, she thought that there was only one cool girl like herself in the world. A grim lowly killer in her early teens. Such a person's ideas and thoughts are full of feelings. But she didn't expect she met a teenager with such exaggerated ability this evening. Daddy, can you help me find the identity of this teenager? Mindy returned home. Damon, the father who prepared supper for him, looked at the mobile phone photo handed by his daughter, and suddenly smiled and said, unexpectedly, my daughter started to miss men too. Father, Mindy blushed and said with some annoyance, I didn't mean that. This teenager has a terrible ability. He directly crushed a car into a discus out of thin air. Oh my god, this is an exaggeration. As for why there is a photo of Su Chen, Mindy will naturally not say that he secretly photographed others when he was in the restaurant. This is too hard to tell. Mutants. Dad's interest suddenly became stronger. He opened a white toolbox from the living room with a secret computer hidden inside. By inputting photos into it, he could find any information about the teenager from the backstage of the Intelligence Bureau, and even call various cameras in Manhattan. This face recognition captures the real-time trace of the other party. When embarking on a career of revenge and thoroughly training his daughter to be a ruthless killing machine, Damon has inextricably linked with the intelligence agency and other violent agencies, so he can collect so many types of weapons. It is even easier to find someone. Something's wrong. Damon was surprised. What's wrong, father? Someone is also looking for this Su Chen's information in the backend of the server. We hit the line, his authority level is so high, quickly exit. In a hurry, Damon immediately shut down the secret computer. The frightened Damon wiped the cold sweat on his face, sighed, and said, some of his information has been hidden, which means that it is the focus of attention from above. What has your friend done? He is probably very dangerous now. After the complete crash of a large test base standing on a snowy field. The Ministry of Defense forces also rushed to the scene as soon as possible to investigate what happened. The snowfield base activated the self-detonation device, and it was suspected that it had suffered an uncontrolled blow. General Marcus was killed in his service and was buried in the escape plane along with some staff. The black box in the experimental base was successfully recovered. Start transferring information. Preliminary results show that the prisoner Su Chen, base number 5162, was out of control when preparing for an autopsy in the experiment room. Multiple monitoring devices lost their signals and were suspected of being destroyed, so they could not accurately represent the situation at the time. Someone from the Ministry of National Defense quickly parsed out the black box message. A shocking news followed. As for Su Chen, who survived the self-destruction of a nuclear explosion, the answer is yes. Because satellite equipment outside low Earth orbit, and even the surveillance equipment in Manhattan, successfully captured the traces of Su Chen's face. He's still alive. Everyone is stupid. After all, what is the concept of being able to survive a nuclear explosion? Is the opponent's physique really immortal, able to survive such a terrifying self-destructive power? What is even more amazing is how the other party managed to cross most of the Americas in less than half a day, and came to a bustling Manhattan city from the snowy terrain countless kilometers away. Interesting. Many generals of the Ministry of National Defense have already reaped this news. I declare that this number 5162 is mine. General Rose stood up directly. That number 5162 should have been my subject. My vision was not wrong at all. The hunting operation was the first one I launched. You snatched the subject from my hands, and the guards were incompetent. 'Cause the opponent escaped successfully. General William Stryker protested angrily. In the conference room, there are many generals who have a lot of opinions on this. But what is creepy is that Su Chen has his own name, but in the mouths of these big people, they are constantly yelling in the name of number 5162. It's like Su Chen, a young man, doesn't deserve to be called a human being. In their eyes, it's just a random shop. Yes, everyone on the scene was very excited about this. Such a tenacious experimental body is really fascinating to get answers from it. The final results soon followed. At the direction of the Secretary of Defense, General Ross stationed in the nearby area waved his fists and celebrated. Obviously he had obtained the ownership of the experiment. Close to the water tower first get the month. General Ross, who has been tackling the mystery of gamma rays and Hulk, just took his troops and rushed to the Central Park in downtown Manhattan in the dark. Downtown Manhattan, Central Park. Under the night. Everything here is very quiet, and the hustle and bustle of the day has long disappeared. Su Chen, wearing a black hood, was sitting on a bench in the park, playing pop songs with his ears and earphones. He lowered his head like this, and his right hand was slowly stroking a stray cat from nowhere. Not long ago, this poor stray cat was rubbing his trousers, and while meowing, it rolled around his feet. This clingy little milk cat suddenly reminded Su Chen of the cat that was raised at home. Because the doors and windows were not closed properly, the cat ran away and was hit and killed by a car on the street outside. Su Chen remembered his sister at the time. This cried for a long time. Why? He sighed slightly. Unexpectedly, after coming to such a longing city, in this big night, there is only a poor stray cat to accompany him. Rewrite reality +2. Rewrite reality +2. The constructed system continuously reminds the information of gene transformation and ability enhancement. In this lonely night, Su Chen kept floating coins around him, appearing out of thin air, and then obliterated in an instant. In this illusion and disillusionment, he constantly uses this ability to rewrite reality to promote transformation. Compared to the target of revenge who doesn't know where, it is even more critical to be the first to find his sister. Despair. At this moment, the clearer and clearer footsteps came from far and near. It's you. Su Chen frowned. Isn't the lowly girl in front of me who is breathing distractedly running and supporting her knees with her hands as the little girl who kills people at the entrance of the lane? One side of the fate. No, it is the third time we have met each other now. And every time I met, it seemed more exaggerated. The other party was killing last time. This time, it was Central Park at 1 o'clock in the middle of the night, and two boys and girls in their early teens had a conversation. You stupid, you shouldn't go shopping casually on the main road, don't you know you are wanted now? The super killer Mindy complained very much. After learning about the situation from Dad, she couldn't help but ran. Although some key information was concealed, Mindy still learned that this was a figure who had escaped from an obscure experimental base. Mindy felt very bitter when he thought that the other side's lonely and indifferent figure must have been hurt a lot. Many people who can feed stray cats under Central Park must also be good people. Quickly follow me, I will take you to a safe place. Mindy said nothing. The sturdy chick just stepped forward and grabbed Su Chen's right hand, trying to drag him out of this unsafe area. Su Chen frowned, but he was a little bit resistant. A few hours ago, an unfamiliar big brother with a gentle face gave himself a bag of donuts. At that time, he felt extremely warm in his heart, but the conspiracy behind him broke his heart. The ghost knows if this woman is catching her attention behind her back. Even the cat at Su Chen's feet started meowing, as if protesting against this savage lowly girl. Go. Mindy turned around and looked at the motionless figure, tears flashing in his eyes, and the smell of begging was very obvious. Su Chen's heart was immediately touched. Only, boom, a sniper rifle sounded from a kilometer away, and an armor-piercing bullet instantly hit the center of Su Chen's forehead. In order to deal with such a so-called immortal existence, the snipers under General Ross specially used armor-piercing bullets constructed from Edmund alloy. Rest in peace. Chapter 11. The power of a sniper rifle is naturally much stronger than a pistol. In particular, the anti-material sniper rifle is more than enough to penetrate an armored vehicle from a kilometer away. After using the bullets cast from Edmund alloy, its power is even stronger. Boom! The nearly 1 meter long barrel suddenly shot out a sharp bullet. The strong recoil was enough to make the soldier's shoulders suddenly sore. From a rooftop a kilometer away, he shot directly at Su Chen on the garden bench. Less than a second. Boom! Su Chen's forehead was hit by a bullet instantly. What? The lowly girl was shocked instinctively, but the scene before her changed her complexion. She saw that sharp bullet was so slightly embedded in the middle of Su Chen's forehead, and the majestic instant penetration was so sudden. However, most of the projectile was exposed to the air. Ding! The bullet couldn't stand at all, it just fell off. As for Su Chen's forehead, there was not even a trace of blood blooming, and the surface of his skin was just a little bit of blood. But in such an instant, even the blood stasis on the surface disappeared. Steel body +2. For the damage caused by the instant penetration force, Su Chen's skin strength has undergone a slight transformation. Obviously, compared to the previous nuclear explosion, the Edmund sniper bullet in front of him is still not enough to see. The sniper on the roof was stunned. Through the eightfold mirror, he saw a strange scene in the next. Not good. I saw on the bench in the park in the distance, a bullet was inexplicably pulled by the invisible force, and it rose directly into the air. In an instant, it was given terrifying energy by the target. With a swish, the whole bullet followed just now. Track, fly upside down. Whoosh, as if electromagnetically accelerated, the entire bullet left a pale track in the air. In less than a second, it pierced the eightfold mirror and passed through the head of the rooftop sniper. No need to go, they have surrounded this place. Su Chen, who was still sitting on the bench, said so slowly. What? In the instinct of a professional killer, Mindy also felt the surrounding atmosphere of Central Park became quieter. She gritted her teeth and was quite sure that if she put on a night vision goggles, she would definitely be able to see a bunch of figures lurking in the dark and approaching slowly. It's a pity that Mindy was in a hurry and put down a fan dress all over his body. As far as the equipment was concerned, only a few butterfly knives tied to his legs under the skirt. What should I do? For some reason, Mindy is full of dependence on the men around him. Compared to the slightly nervous Mindy, Su Chen's indifferent expression has a calm expression on his face, as if he himself is really coming to the park for a walk, strolling in the courtyard, leisurely and without any sense of panic. Come and kill one by one. 13-year-old Su Chen did not notice much of the surveillance equipment scattered all over the city streets. However, after experiencing the nuclear explosion and escaping from the criminal experimental base, he was very calm and composed. There is always a solution to a problem. Since the other party is willing to come, then I don't mind sending all these people to death. Let's kill one by one. Mindy's smile became more bitter, and this guy's tone was more arrogant than his own. He was just a gangster facing the underground world, but what he had to face was a modern army. You hide. It is much harder for Su Chen to say a word to this girl who kindly reminded him, after all, he doesn't want to involve other people. As for the stray cat rubbing against him, Su Chen himself pushed it out. In the battle that is about to break out, staying by your side is not a wise move. At this moment, a bright and whitish searchlight illuminates in this way, and Su Chen and Mindy's figure in the dark night are completely illuminated. Mindy didn't dare to look directly at the high-power searchlight in front of him. The blazing bright light on the body was enough to make people feel the temperature, and the eyes were enough to blind people. Number 5162, raised your hands and immediately surrendered to me. Accompanied by the blessing of a tweeter. Number 5162. Su Chen suddenly remembered that this was the number he was bound to when he was in the experimental base. My name is Su Chen. He is not a merchandise to be manipulated by others, to be labeled as meaningless humiliation. At this moment, an invisible wave rippled around Su Chen. His cold eyes looked directly at the figure behind the searchlight, and coins appeared out of thin air in the palm of his right hand, which instantly turned into sharp needles in the plasticized state of the power of mind, flying directly to the surroundings. Whoosh! There were waves of howling sounds in the air. Accompanied by it were fireworks blooming around the muzzle. Under the tacit understanding of each other, the two sides did not declare war. Puff! The sound of penetrating flesh and blood continued to burst, and the flying needles wrapped by the power of thought had terrible penetration. When they flew around, they instantly pierced through the shadows hidden in the dark. The high-power searchlight not far ahead made a bang, and the light source was destroyed by the sharp needle qui. As for the bullets and fireworks that bloomed at their muzzles, they came from all directions, dense as rain. It's a pity that a few meters away from Su Chen's whole body, an almost invisible barrier was just supported, blocking all attacks. Mindy watched the rippling waves around him, and suddenly realized that this indifferent guy had sheltered himself within this barrier. Carefully, but at this moment, her pupils shrank slightly, and a giant figure surged from the ground in front of him, and every step of his movement caused a big earthquake and tremor. Roar! Accompanied by a roar, the monster body that looked like a small mountain tore through the barrier in front of him, and directly rushed towards Su Chen's figure. Roar! Accompanied by a roar that shook the sky, an extremely large monster rushed from the sky. Its condescending figure cast a huge shadow, the moonlight was completely obscured, and the figures of Su Chen and Mindy were all shrouded in it. Wow! His body, like a small mountain bag, was wrapped in a very shocking energy, and it smashed the invisible barrier in front of him. Roll! There was a ripple in Su Chen's eyes, and the fluctuating thoughts in his body caused the air around him to slowly rise. In an instant, boom! An extremely terrifying air cannonball bombarded the monster in front of you completely under the rush of thought power. With a bang, the momentum that was pouring in front of you suddenly stopped, and the entire monster's body flew upside down. Many meters away on the ground. Mindy breathed a sigh of relief. God knows what she has just experienced. Even the super-killing girl who grew up in the gang-slaying since she was a child is terrified by the sudden monster in front of her. This is not a person. This is obviously a monster. Oh my God, what exactly is this? A word fell. Mindy's face changed. Under the hazy moonlight, on the ground more than 10 meters away, a monster that looked like a mountain bag stood up directly. The body a few meters high was covered with rotten skin, accompanied by his breathing, like a molten the pungent smell of sulfur, like a pulp, just hit his face. I'm about to throw up. Mindy forcibly covered his nose, but an impression appeared in his mind. This seems to be Hulk. No, it should be a similar monster. Hulk's news report was published at least 2 years ago, and the biochemical monsters created by the accidental experiment of gamma rays have once become a nightmare in this country. The figure of General Ross was also frequently reported on major news headlines, announcing that Hulk, who was circulating around the world, was wanted worldwide. The recent experimental progress has ushered in a breakthrough. General Ross's top subordinate, Emil Bronsky, successfully implanted cells with gamma rays, and was promoted to a terrifying existence called hatred. Kill him. General Rose, who was hiding in the dark, gave the order coldly. Roar. He roared loudly and slapped his hands on his heart to show his response. Compared with Hulk, who is out of control rage, the hatred after transformation has wisdom. Let's start. Under an order of General Ross, he was lying in ambush in the woods around Central Park, and saw a special vehicle equipped with a radar device, and suddenly there was a harsh sound. Hum. The impact of sonic waves even directly caused ripples in the air. This was a sonic device designed to deal with Hulk in the past, but it is now used by General Ross to beat mosquitoes with cannons. What? Mindy fell to the ground in pain at this moment. She covered her ears tightly and rolled desperately on the ground. At this moment, even Su Chen's complexion was distorted when he was in the focus of multiple sonic devices. Pain. He didn't cover his ears, even though his eardrums were completely penetrated by the terrible sound waves. His ears bleed, but he quickly healed. A pair of cold eyes stared at the huge monster coming in front of him. Don't listen to me and stop the noise. Su Chen roared. Rage's emotions at this moment completely destroyed the calm mind. Boom. It's like the so-called Immortal's utterances. A terrifying force acts on reality, involving reality, and tampering with it. In an instant, all the special vehicles around exploded directly, orange-red. Fireworks rose into the air. The harsh sonic noise disappeared. Boom. At the same time, Su Chen kicked the ground and looked at the monster coming. He was actually not afraid, but went up to the front with full fighting spirit. Just rely on you. Disgusting and silent ridicule. The whole person's physique crashed like a train moving at full speed. Compared with his giant physique, Su Chen's 13-year-old physique, once compared, is simply a difference, one place every day. But the collision between the two happened completely in an instant. Boom. Su Chen shook his fist and knocked out without accident. But what surprised the people present was that the hatred of rushing also contained the momentum of the impact at this moment, and the whole person actually stopped under the opponent's fist. Impossible. General Rose's face changed drastically, and he did not dare to imagine that the invincible hatred in front of him was actually blocked by a child's fist. That's it. Su Chen was thrown into the air with a cold face, his right toe hit the air, and faint ripples filled the bottom of his feet, and he saw a supporting force that made him soar into the air. This kind of use of the surrounding energy can be said to be amazing. Disgust was a little dumbfounded, but his straight eyes also noticed the figure that the opponent had rushed into the air. Impossible. How does the opponent's thin body achieve such great strength? He couldn't believe it. Inexplicably, I even felt that the collision between the two just now was an illusion. The expression fell into a daze. Disgust waved his huge fist, and blasted directly at the figure in front of him. See you in my pity. I hate that bulky fist is thicker than Su Chen's waist. Boom. Under the strong contrast between the two, it soon ushered in the second collision. Boom. Abomination only felt the boundless power rushing in front of him, as if it was an overwhelming blast. In less than a second, his two big feet standing on the ground broke away from the ground in this way, but the entire huge physique blasted out directly under Su Chen's punch. That's it. The cold sarcasm, the relentless mockery of hatred, until his figure fluttered to the ground. Hatred then angered why the opponent's power soared so much in an instant. This is impossible. Compared with the fist blow of the frontal contact, the mental distress is the problem that hates this time. He couldn't believe that the little boy in front of him blasted himself with a punch. The huge difference in physique is simply huge difference. But this guy's fist seemed like a huge mountain blasted by, and his body couldn't resist it at all. That's it. Su Chen's playful words were repeated again. His toes were a little bit, and the wind provided the supporting kinetic energy under his feet, and the slender figure was suspended in the air again. As for the absorption and release of all energy from the outside world, Su Chen has no small insights. The warm wind around him can provide assistance. His figure is like adding a pair of wings, suddenly flying towards the figure in front of him. Here we go again. There was a trace of anger under the disgusting face. His temper was already irritable. Under the influence of the gamma rays in the cell, although he was not dazzled by the anger like Hulk, the hatred behind him was still a little hard to control his anger. He can't tolerate a little boy as big as a beanie to humiliate him. Roar. An angry roar of hatred. Just like this, with his feet on the ground, the huge physique as big as a mountain bag rushed into the sky, vowing to completely blast the flying little ghost. Boom. There was a huge roar in the air. The surging flocculent waves swept all around in a shock wave. What? A voice full of pain just yelled from the sky, and the figure of hatred hit the ground like a cannonball. Boom. The violent blasting momentum even completely destroyed the lawn ground of the park, smashing a terrifying pit. He hated rage, and stood up from the dusty ground. It was just a violent shot that was even more unreasonable. The thin body burst out with a terrifying impact, and it hit him again with a punch. Fly. Whoosh. At this moment, the fluttering hatred broke many thick trees one after another, and the rotten skin covered with scales burst out foul-smelling plasma. Strength plus 50. Strength plus 50. Steel body plus 50. The constructed system continuously records the metamorphosis information at the genetic level. Su Chen collided with his loathing body, which made his strength rise continuously. What's more, after the nuclear explosion, his physical strength has risen to a terrifying level. Under the physique of a 13-year-old boy, every cell contains majestic and abundant power. So what is the tall hatred? You are a monster from human beings. I see human cowardice in your pupils. Su Chen said coldly. His figure stepped on the forest road and walked unhurriedly, as if the hatred in front of him had been completely reduced to a Chinese meal, which did not affect his patience in the slightest. From time to time, bullets flew from the woods under the dark night everywhere, and the dull sniper sounds continued to sound. It's just that Su Chen was like opening his eyes on his back. A bullet could not approach his body, and was completely forced to stop in the air by an invisible thought force fluctuation. Die, accompanied by a thought of him. The hovering bullets, under the control of Nian power, returned to their original owners, piercing the heads of the soldiers in the dark one after another. Roar. There was another roar, unable to bear the arrogant hatred of the young man in front of him. Rage rose again. Great earthquake trembled. He rushed forward, and his tightly held right fist hit the figure in front of him like this. Too slow. Su Chen's handsome and childish face does not have a hint of fear, and the improvement of physical fitness is all round. At least, his pair of clear black and white eyes possess extraordinary dynamic vision capabilities, directly converging the opponent's coherent movements into the eyes, and splitting them into frames of movie pictures. As you can imagine, the opponent's movements seem a bit slow. Boom. Su Chen, who was not moving, stretched his right hand forward, and the second hair came first. The tightly pinched fist was wrapped in violent power and hit the opponent's fist head-on. Click. In an instant, the opponent's knuckles broke directly, and the bones of the entire arm were completely dislocated and cracked at the moment of the collision. What? Abhorred the pain and screamed. But what made him feel extremely embarrassed is that the opponent's right hand directly grasped one of his knuckles, and the boundless force that came in seemed to be completely broken off this finger, and driven by this force, he hated the huge so far off the ground. Whoosh. He drew an arc in midair and fell heavily on the side of Su Chen's other transformation. As for the finger that borrowed the force, in the end it was directly pulled off abruptly. Really poor guy. Su Chen's cold expression didn't have much emotional fluctuations. And the hatred in front of him was severely injured in his body, and his figure began to shrink, and the bloody monster in front of him quickly turned back into a sturdy man. Compared to Hulk, who can constantly grow stronger through anger, hatred obviously does not have this terrible anger effect after having wisdom. Rage again and again only got another shame. And still a multiplier effect. Sure enough, it is the monster after the transformation. Su Chen's eyes flashed with killing intent. Despair. He snapped his fingers, and without much hesitation, it turned into a spray of air cannon and completely shattered the opponent's head. Then it was the other people's turn. Su Chen's gaze swept to the garden area in the distance. The personnel who had been yelling with loudspeakers before seemed unconscious and began to evacuate secretly. But how could he easily let them go? To Su Chen's surprise, the lowly girl in the pink dress did not hide. Instead, she was chasing the enemy, and a butterfly knife that she took out from nowhere was accurately thrown through the head of a soldier. Whoosh! Although this lowly girl was wearing a pink dress, her chasing movements were not slow. A butterfly knife tied to her leg under her skirt was thrown out by her casually, hitting the enemy's back one after another. Not to mention that she picked up an automatic rifle from a corpse in the forest road. Click. After loading, he quickly pressed the trigger on his shoulders, and the whole action was done in one go. The precise shooting ability, like cutting the grass, killed the enemy's figure and fell down. This girl, Su Chen was also slightly surprised, but he could not think of a young loli who was probably only a little older than his sister, but she was proficient in so many firearms and surprised him with her superb throwing skills. After solving the abomination monster, Su Chen's next target is naturally the person who just spoke. There was a gust of wind on the flat ground. Su Chen's long black hair hung directly upside down, and his feet were off the ground. At this moment, his figure soared into the air, following his keen hearing ability, and flew directly towards outside of Central Park. Want to escape? For the general who kept calling himself with the number of the experimental base, Su Chen's eyes showed a cold killing intent. Not good. The driver of the armored vehicle who had just driven out of the forest road suddenly yelled, and he saw a figure out of the window of the car as a direct bombardment like a cannonball. Boom! Under the horrible impact, the right side of the armored car sank directly, and the whole car rolled several times in the air and was completely overturned on the ground. The reason for all this is just because Su Chen collided with his body. His slender and thin physique is already stronger than a steel plate made of stainless steel, and his body is full of surging vitality. A slight pinch of his right hand can feel a surge of power. Not to mention an armored car, even a train, Su Chen is confident that it will completely overturn it. Boom! The gunfire suddenly burst, and the figure in the driver's seat kept pulling the trigger. It's just that the poor pistol bullet fell on Su Chen's skin, and the bullet burst directly, and then the bullet flew out. What's the matter with this guy's body? This is a concept that all soldiers cannot imagine. From the beginning of the formulation of the action, they all found that the number 5162 to be arrested did not meet the definition in their minds. The information recorded by the black box is very limited. After all, the monitoring equipment in the laboratory aisle was destroyed by Su Chen a lot. According to General Stryker, who took over at the beginning, this is nothing but a self-healing person, at least hundreds of times stronger than Wolverine's cell activity. Its vitality is amazing, and it is the so-called key to immortality for human beings. He was not too surprised to survive the nuclear explosion, because Wolverine also had such a feat in World War II. But Wolverine was dismissive in the eyes of their military. In the past, they were successfully concocted into a killing machine and successfully launched the X-weapon project. So for this number 5162, everyone knows that some changes have taken place in his body, but he still disdains it from the bottom of my heart. What kind of waves can a 13-year-old kid make? But now, the hatred fell. Even General Ross may not be able to escape to death. Whoosh! Su Chen's thought, the figure in the driving seat was broken by a majestic force of thought. Then, the figure of the general in the rear compartment was dragged out of the inside by an invisible drag force. What? He screamed in pain, because his feet were just stuck, and now he was dragged out by a force, causing the bones of his feet to be completely broken. It seems you are not General Stryker. Su Chen's words are a little cold. He searched through his mobile phone and naturally knew what the infamous General Stryker looked like. The image of this guy in front of him obviously doesn't match. Little beast, number 5162, don't think you can escape our sight. General Rose scolded. Even under the control of others, this cold iron-blooded general is still cursing the enemy in front of him, without the slightest intention of begging for mercy. Su Chen's childish face did not show a trace of movement, just a pair of eyes fixed on the other's face, and he said word by word, "Remember, my name is Su Chen, and I will be a dog in my next life." Click. Without saying much, he directly broke General Rose's neck out of thin air. It seems particularly puzzled. The air cannon, which was turned into a power of thought, directly blasted his body without a hole. The large experimental base on the snowy field, and even the bound number 5162, seemed to have become a dream of the past, and it seemed that all nightmares were completely over. But the enemy who came suddenly told him that there was no end to it. This moment, more and more revenge thoughts emerged in Su Chen's heart, and the original intention of shaking disappeared without a trace. Unless everything is completely ended, the peaceful life I want will never come. The killing intent on his face became more and more diffuse. Su Chen. A gentle word came from behind, but the super killer Mindy, who had witnessed everything, came over. She probably understood what happened to this young man, but the tenderness that emerged in her heart made her want to hug this young man very much. Let's go. Mindy extended an invitation to him again, and his right hand directly held his palm. Central Park can't stay any longer. Although in the middle of the night, the movement here is difficult to be noticed by the outside, but the enemies who are chasing after will come sooner or later. With her rich experience as a killer, she was able to take the teenager to her safe house without risk. This time, Su Chen didn't avoid it, because he knew that this girl was the first good person he met in downtown Manhattan. But what the two of them didn't know at all was how big trouble awaiting them next. The trajectory of destiny will move from here to another turning point. In fact, when some intelligence agencies of the Ministry of National Defense started investigating Su Chen, it was not only Daddy Damon who accidentally hit the line. Besides, it has been working to unearth the secret mysterious organization behind the Ministry of National Defense, a rising tide organization that gathers elite hacker members from all over the world, and is also secretly observing what surprises these secret intelligence personnel can bring to them. Don't underestimate these hackers. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. has secretly recruited many of these elites. The future Shockwave girl Daisy John News is the best example. Come, here, there may be big news. Not long ago, a left-behind hacker immediately observed that the backstage of the Intelligence Bureau kept calling major camera equipment to track a teenager in Manhattan. These bold and careful members are bold and bold. Under the encryption algorithm, they are not afraid of revealing their identities and directly forcibly crack the official backstage. Wow, Jesus is on. It's a superpower who escaped from a large experimental base. Now the arrest is taken over by General Ross. Destination: Central Park in downtown Manhattan. Go, guys. For an instant, a member of the camera team took the vehicle to Central Park. They will take pictures in secret, and then sell the material information to major media at a large price. In addition, the secret file information that the Influx organization cracked by itself will also be perfectly packaged and sent to the Ministry of National Defense. Why send it to them? Naturally, it is not a good deed. This comes from the direct blackmail of the Rising Tide organization to the military. No, then continue to sell to the media to further sublimate and hype the whole incident. Soon, a good news came from the front. Members of the High Tide organization successfully took some pictures and also picked up cameras on the heads of many soldiers. It didn't take much time, and a rough edited video was sent to Manhattan TV. The TV station personnel were taken aback. You must know that whether it is an accidental car accident or a gunfight fire, the exclusive photographic material that can be captured in the first time can be sold to the TV station. After all, they also need these eye-catching exclusive news for coverage. With such a demand, it naturally gave birth to many photojournalists' jobs. But the video footage given by the High Tide organization is really shocking and exciting. Oh my God, immediately transfer the money to the Rising Tide organization. We need this material. Be sure to report it exclusively. At this moment, an extremely eye-catching title emerged in the head of the female director. Shock. Our country's army can't stop a young man's attack. What happened to this country's army? Su Chen naturally didn't know that the development of things deviated from his imagination. At this time, he was taken to a secret suburban house by the figure of super killer Mindy. Mindy McCready. Su Chen also knew her name. In a blink, their figures have come to a small single-family courtyard. This is my safe house, Mindy introduced. The lowly girl directly opened her locked door and invited Su Chen into the door. Along the way, Mindy, who is very experienced in investigating, has long ensured that the two figures will not be exposed to any surveillance probe. Welcome. Just like showing off the toys in his hands to friends, Mindy introduced Su Chen to all of the safe house. Barrett Sniper Rifle. M16 Series Fully Automatic Rifle. Carbine. These outside markets are not available. Looking at the various types of guns hanging on one wall after another, Su Chen was still a little surprised. How did this girl spend her childhood? This is too sturdy, too cool. My house is not far from here. Generally, before dispatching missions, I always come to this safe house to change equipment, put on plain clothes, and set off directly. Mindy smiled. How old are you? Su Chen is very curious. It just passed my birthday, I'm 14 years old. She patted her heart, a picture of a little adult. I really admire you. Su Chen praised from the bottom of his heart, a 14-year-old grim lowly killer, who is extremely ideological. I just admire you, you are much cooler than me, you just overturned an army. Mindy patted Su Chen on the shoulder and gave him a thumbs up, a vivid image of a jumping girl. Su Chen has become acquainted with her, and the chattering box has been opened a lot, and the previously indifferent face is a little relaxed. How handsome you are like this. Mindy, the jumping girl, also stretched out her hand to pinch his face, but she was a little elder sister. But when she thought of the other person's cold and merciless slaughter before, she still didn't dare to be too out of the ordinary, stuck out her tongue cutely, and withdrew her hand. Correct. Forgot to call. She suddenly remembered an important thing, that is, she forgot to contact her father. She went out in a hurry just now, but forgot to bring her mobile phone. But now after dialing back to the house, there is no call for a long time. Hurry up and answer the phone. Mindy suddenly became anxious. Su Chen frowned at this time, and suddenly realized something was wrong. But after a minute, there was still no response. Not good. Daddy may have something wrong. Mindy's delicate face was full of nervousness. She hurriedly picked up a large caliber automatic rifle from the wall, put it on her back, straddled one foot on the stool, and picked up the throwing knife from the table. Butterfly knife, uniformly hung on the long leg straps under his skirt. Su Chen did not hesitate, and directly followed her figure all the way out of the safe house. Mindy's house is not far from the safe house. Walk along a laneway, and you can see a detached villa not far away. Mindy jumped in through the back door very quickly. Someone broke in. Mindy pressed his footsteps and quietly walked into his living room, but the overturned tables and even the tableware scattered all over the place undoubtedly showed that there was a fight here. They took my dad away. And no matter Mindy searched the entire room, he couldn't find the figure of Big Daddy Damon. At the same time, the secret computer hidden in the toolbox disappeared. Mindy was very anxious and found a mobile phone directly from a drawer on the counter. In order to prevent one of us from being caught, Dad and I will wear a micro tracker on our clothes. After returning from Central Park, I went through the safe house to stay for a while, which took a lot of time. But it takes some time for the other party to follow the address on the computer background to arrest people. It is very possible that his father has not been completely taken away. Everything can be completely retained. Whoosh! A car just rushes out of the street. For a super killer, driving such a car is much simpler than shooting the enemy accurately. It's not far. Mindy stepped on the gas pedal, and the 14-year-old Lolita was extremely small and exquisite, so it seemed that Mindy in the driver's seat was about to stand up. This is an inexplicable cute spot. However, Su Chen didn't feel funny in his heart. After all, if he guessed right, the other party's father might be implicated because of him. He can only pray from the bottom of his heart that the other party will not have trouble. If he can accurately control the power of rewriting reality, he will not be as passive as he is now, and he will travel directly through the space to reach his destination. However, the immediate goal is not too far away. Mindy's sturdy elegance caused the entire car to swing more than 90 degrees, and steadily stopped at the top of a road. Wrong. She suddenly felt teased. Mindy opened the door of the car, and pointed to the map clearly according to the location specified by the phone's tracker. But in front of him was a spacious road with no trace of humans, only a conspicuous trash can appeared in sight. Mindy scolded and kicked the trash can that was as high as a person in front of him. Among the pile of trash that fell, he had to have a gray t-shirt. The big old man's clothes were thrown away. This is a trick to tease myself. The eyes of Super Killer suddenly turned red. At this moment, she suddenly remembered that her enemy was not those stupid gang members at all, but the state machine that was crushing on her shoulders like a mountain. How can these clumsy skills be used by military personnel? Mindy gritted his teeth and dialed another number on the phone. That was the friend of Daddy Damon, who was once a close friend of the intelligence agency, who also entrusted his channels to obtain a lot of weapons and equipment. Toot. As a result, 2 or 3 calls were made, but no one answered them. An ominous meaning permeated his heart. Perhaps he had also been implicated and was completely arrested. This bold concept of synergy made Mindy's heart awkward. Hurry up, it's not safe here. Mindy Shengsheng endured his crying and sat firmly in the driving position. Su Chen, who looked in his eyes, only felt a little pain in his heart. If it were a stranger, he wouldn't be so uncomfortable. But the indifferent and vigilant heart just let go of some guards, ready to accept a new friend, but a ruthless answer came, and he seemed to have killed the friend's family. He has caused too much trouble to others. At the moment when they were confused, the two came to the safe house like this. As for Mindy's old house, naturally he couldn't stay. Inside the safe house with 3 high walls full of guns, compared to the joyous atmosphere before, after returning here, it was a serious and solemn one, and the words of conversation were much less. The lowly girl who had been happily jumping out became extremely silent. She was able to kill 7 in and out in the underground garage of an underground gang last year, without changing her face. But for the enemy she is facing now, she feels powerless and unable to start. She can't even find where her father is hiding. After all, they are just 2 children, without a background that can reach the sky, no extraordinary means, facing Damon who has evaporated from the world, they can only wait here helplessly. The sky outside the window has gradually brightened. The new dawn has arrived, but the light waiting for the 2 people in the house has not arrived yet. I will definitely help you. Su Chen didn't know how to comfort each other, but could only give promises. How can you help me? Can you go bomb the barracks? Against this country. Against this world. Mindy choked directly. Under her uncontrollable emotions, there were tears in her eyes, and her delicate face was full of tears, and the depression that had been suppressed for a long time broke out. After all, he is only a 14-year-old child. No matter how rich he is, he still can't resist the departure of his relatives. At this time, a worse news came. The TV screen that has been turned on has switched programs. Now we will broadcast a piece of news for all citizens. It is reported that there was a war in Central Park in downtown Manhattan in the early hours of this morning. General Ross's troops were fighting a mutant, and the result was tragic extinction. General Ross himself was even more on the scene. This sensational news immediately shocked every viewer in front of the TV. In a peaceful age, can an army be unable to strike a mutant? Is this another terrorist attack launched by the Mutant Brotherhood? Or is the army arresting a mutant who was brutally killed? Soon, the exclusive TV station broadcasted the battle scenes of Central Park that night. The flying shuttle's sharp needles overwhelmingly took the soldiers' lives, and a thin young figure hit a heavy monster into flight. Although the picture taken by the camera is black and white, all of this makes people feel more exciting than Hollywood blockbusters. Under the spread of private news, the ratings of TV stations suddenly increased. The military department was caught off guard. It was impossible to think that the despicable Rising Tide organization would play with them, but they quickly reacted and immediately launched a PR to the TV station. After learning about it, the military representative relayed the news to our TV station. At this time, the host appeared on the screen, and he recited the handed note without any haste. The suspect is a new member of the Brotherhood of Terrorist Organization, and he is a vicious extreme mutant, a Chinese teenager, named Su Chen. What awaits him is the highest level S-class wanted order. In other words, he has nowhere to go anywhere. In order to make it easier for the audience to recognize, the black and white image of Su Chen is magnified in front of the TV. See this. Su Chen, who was standing in front of the TV, was already distorted. Central Park is adjacent to the most prosperous area in Manhattan. Naturally, I can't hide the reports from the outside. In fact, Su Chen even has a trace of hope in his heart, hoping that the media or other people will clean up his identity and completely rehabilitate him. As a result, he was an innocent experimental mouse, a military experimental subject who had escaped from the dead. Just today, he was completely wanted globally and transformed into a mutant member of an extreme terrorist organization. This is nonsense. He squeezed his fists, his breath became more and more rapid, his eyes were red, and his shoulders rose and fell slightly, as if he was enduring some great grievance and pain. In an hour, the newly renovated Dome building in the first city will hold a press conference where the specific details of the suspect will be announced. The host's voice continued to talk in front of the TV. The reason for choosing the Dome building is that this is a high-tech prison newly renovated by the military, which has not yet been put into use. Today's unusual appearance is also to show the criminals that this is his future home. The irony is full of strength. The next news was to completely collapse Mindy beside him. But the good news that can be revealed is that an accomplice of the suspect has been completely killed when he absconded in fear of crime. One of the suspect's accomplices has been completely killed when he absconded in fear of crime. At the same time that the TV station broadcasted, the head of the old man was also prominently posted. This moment, Mindy finally couldn't contain the pain in his heart, and the tears accumulated in his eyes suddenly vented like a gate. She knelt down uncomfortably, and she lay on the ground and started crying loudly. For his father, Damon, the super killer, Mindy grew up rebellious, somewhat resentful and resentful. The toys bought by other people's daughters are all Barbie dolls. And her toys are all forms of guns. The daughter of someone else's family played in the world since childhood and enjoyed a cheerful childhood. In her childhood, she trained hard and became a top female killer. After she grew up, she finally understood that she was just a tool for her father's revenge, a slaughter machine that she had dedicated her efforts to forging her mother's death. Sometimes, she can't tell how much Damon loves her daughter. Perhaps the eldest dad wants to return to her mother more than herself. So when it came to the rebellious period, Super Killer had a little resistance in her heart. She wanted to truly return to campus and integrate into the expected student life. But now, just because of a low-handed photo act and a willful internet search, it led to a very tragic tragedy. The reason is the boy next to him. I blame you, I blame you. If it weren't for you, nothing would happen. I hate you. The super killer rage in front of her stood up and slapped Su Chen in front of her with her hands. Su Chen was speechless, just lowered his head, his face was gloomy, and he didn't know what he was thinking. He wanted to comfort her, but when he thought that the other party complained about himself so much, he probably wouldn't have to do it in the future. Maybe he would become an enemy in the future. Thinking of this, Su Chen put his arms around the other party and put them down. Tears soaked his black sweater. The flapping hands had already stopped, and the lowly killer, who had escaped the first time I met, was so helpless and pitiful at this moment. At this time, Mindy reminded Su Chen of his sister. After losing her mother, Susan also burst into tears. Mindy hung in Su Chen's heart, sobbing desperately. I don't know how long it has passed, she just fell asleep in Su Chen's arms with tears on her face. It seems that the excessive accumulation of pain made her fall asleep in a daze. It's okay to fall asleep. Su Chen glanced at the clocks on the wall, and there was not much time left before their press conference. The Dome is located in Capital City. Although both are on the east coast of Manhattan, there is a certain distance between the two places. Even if it is a car, it takes at least a few hours. At this moment, Su Chen, whose tenderness had faded away, had no expression on his face, as if he had been hit by reality in a mess. Do not. At this time, countless waves have already been set off in his heart, just like the sea under the stormy night, countless waves rolled over. There was even more boundless hatred in his mind, like a bottomless abyss, gradually exuding an aura of evil and despair. Wanted worldwide, the poor laboratory mouse turned into a mutant member of the terrorist organization. Aggressive enemies do not give themselves a chance to breathe at all. The longing for a peaceful life has gradually become a luxury. Even the only person in Manhattan who treats himself well has suffered misfortune because of being implicated. Why is it me? Why is it always me who suffers? My mother passed away, my sister disappeared, and a series of sufferings seemed to torment me. Su Chen doesn't understand. The 13-year-old didn't want to figure it out either. At this moment, just thinking of revenge and murder. Give yourself all desperate enemies, and those who stand in front of you should all go to hell. At such a desperate moment, Su Chen's slightly delicate and handsome face gradually faded away from his childishness, and his indifferent and merciless killing intent became more and more apparent. He didn't want to give in. I will return your share back. Looking at Mindy, who was sleeping, he walked straight out of the safe house. Goal. Dome building. If Su Chen just rushes past, I am afraid it will be too late for the press conference period to completely catch up. However, Su Chen, who was extremely cold-faced, was already in a state of emotional breakdown. His heart was completely blackened, and he directly recalled how he could instantly move from the snowy field to the city of Manhattan hundreds of kilometers away. Suddenly realized in the heart, invisible ripples emerged around the body. A force of change involving reality made him directly open a door to space. Su Chen stepped forward, and the street scene in front of him changed drastically. In this way, he came to a city far away in an instant. Capital City. Looking at the magnificent building not far away, like a dome building with a sharp sword straight through the sky, Su Chen's indifferent expression did not have any emotional ups and downs, and he walked forward like this. Despair. The sound of footsteps resounded in this land. He put on his black hood, and the drooping black bangs couldn't hide the murderous intent in his eyes. Soon, the sound of footsteps disappeared. His figure is still striding forward, but at this moment, every step of his fall is in the air, and the space in front of him is like an invisible staircase to heaven, allowing Su Chen to walk in midair. Oh my God, look, who is this? God, this boy is walking in the air. This is too beautiful. At this time, outside the National Defense Headquarters building, many reporters had already rushed in. At this time, they witnessed this mysterious and weird scene one by one. Isn't this a wanted criminal from that terrorist organization? Oh my God, you guys are really big-hearted. This is not the young wanted criminal reported in the morning. A word to wake up the dreamer. Everyone was even more excited when they heard the words, and the SLR in their hands suddenly flickered. Compared to reporters who watched the excitement, the faces of the security guards outside the building changed drastically. The gun insurance was opened one by one, and everyone's muzzle was pointed at the figure in the air. The other party killed it. No one thought that Su Chen, who was just announced as the world's most wanted S-class criminal in the morning, was so unscrupulous that he appeared in everyone's field of vision under the eyes of everyone and rode a mysterious power to ascend the ladder. Boom! A round of bullets went into the air continuously. Su Chen turned a deaf ear to a wave of thought power outside his body, which was like an invisible barrier supported around his body, and all the bullets were shot out. He didn't have the slightest fear, just walked in the air like walking on the ground, and came to the high sky with such an unhurried step. At this time, he was able to easily overlook the entire building and the earth. Now, let you feel the pain I endured before. A radiant light lingered from his body. Gradually, a wave of terrifying energy rose directly, resembling a volcano that was ready to erupt, and set off a terrifying momentum. No one knows where the nuclear explosion that bloomed in the large experimental base before went. In fact, it's not disappearing. It was Su Chen's body that absorbed the energy of the entire nuclear explosion. Therefore, during this period of time, he was walking in Manhattan like a humanoid weapon. He is too kind. This time, he decided to play a big wave. It's time for them to feel the pain of being baptized by a nuclear explosion. The super killer Mindy, who had fallen asleep in a daze, suddenly woke up in a nightmare. She dreamed of the death of her father. But soon, the picture in the dream turned again and turned into a hell picture of Su Chen's bloodbath. Su Chen. Mindy's face changed. But in the safe house in front of him, there is no such thing as Su Chen. She suddenly remembered that she had said a lot of bad words when she lost control of her emotions. After her reason came back, she realized that she had lost her mind. After all the roots and mistakes were not in Su Chen's body. He is also a victim. His own words can only penetrate his heart like a sharp sword. Suddenly, she turned and looked at the TV next to her, and saw that the upcoming press conference was being reported on the screen in real time, but what no one expected was that the young man who had just been declared the most wanted criminal in the world was just like that. Over the sky. Su Chen. For a while, Mindy's delicate face showed a completely shocked look, and she looked at it in disbelief. Su Chen, don't do stupid things. Mindy knows how much wrong Su Chen has suffered under his indifferent and ruthless face, and how much pain he has endured in his heart, and how much killing intent has been suppressed for a long time. After reading some information on the backstage, she naturally knew that Su Chen was a laboratory mouse who had escaped from the dead, and was not a heinous enemy at all. But once a landmark building is attacked under the eyes of the people of the world, then nothing can be turned back. Turn around. Su Chen, who was so disappointed in the world, never thought of this term at all. From this moment on, he just wanted the world to experience the pain he endured. Nuclear explosion. It was these guys who bestowed it on themselves. Not many people can imagine that a person's body can completely store the power of a nuclear explosion in a person's body in an instant. External energy is like water, and the body is like a wooden barrel. To carry so much vast energy in an instant, it is natural to need an extremely strong body. Su Chen's body is invincible. After undergoing the baptism of nuclear explosion, the reorganized and healed physique has developed a new resistance, can perfectly adapt to the horrible energy shock, and the muscle strength of the body has climbed to a new stage. Therefore, he can walk in the city with a vast and majestic energy like a person who is okay. It's time to return all of this to you. Su Chen couldn't hear the panic of the people below. The continuous energy fluctuations in his body made the fluctuations of the surrounding air flow more and more chaotic, like a typhoon passing by, raging between the heaven and the earth. Soon, the lingering energy gradually penetrated out of the body and continuously spewed out from his body. At this moment, Su Chen, who was full of light, was like a rising sun. The blazing daylight light covered everything in the line of sight in an instant, and the majestic energy contained in the light also destroyed everything here. Do not run away. The guards on the ground scurrying around, they didn't expect the figure climbing in the air to explode. Moreover, the burst of energy was like a pouring sun blasting in, and the entire magnificent building, like a sharp blade out of its sheath, evaporated instantly like a snowman under the summer sun. What? The figures running on the ground, and even the reporters joining in the excitement, could not escape this catastrophe at all. Their figure also evaporated. Soon, the light of the nuclear explosion that swept out perfectly covered the entire area of the building, slaughtering the building, as well as all the soldiers and staff in it. From a distance, you can see a vast and magnificent mushroom cloud rising above the ground. No one thought that this building, which was placed high hopes by the military to ridicule criminals, would come to the end of being approved. Oh my God, what is this? God is on, isn't that young man blew himself up? I was absolutely right. The wanted criminal turned into a sun, releasing a very dazzling light. The audience in front of the TV station was also completely stunned. However, the satellite signal was cut off on the screen at this time, and the live broadcast screen could not be transferred at all. No matter how stupid people are, it is vaguely aware that the light released from the young man's body just now seems to have turned into a terrifying explosion and attacked the entire landmark building. Of course, the citizens of the capital city saw this scene very clearly. A creepy mushroom cloud rose above the ground far away. Oh my God, our country has suffered a nuclear explosion. Soon, someone sent the camera mushroom cloud image to the social platform via mobile phone. Shock. The building designed by Iron Man was nuclear exploded. The military was slapped face to face. This scene is really spectacular. For a time, the number of hits broke hundreds of thousands in an instant, and more people know that Washington, D.C., which is popularly known as the capital city, has been attacked. Wait, isn't this a joke? In downtown Manhattan, Tony Stark in the Stark headquarters building almost squirted water out of his mouth when he heard the news. The safest facility in the world will never allow any criminal to escape from prison, but hasn't it been put into use yet? Is it just nuclear exploded at close range? This made Tony feel an extremely slap in the face. Looking at the video images reposted from various sources, Tony, who has become Iron Man, became extremely curious. Jarvis. Yes, sir. Jarvis, the artificial intelligence butler, immediately understood his owner's intentions. Through the satellite equipment linked to the low Earth orbit, Jarvis immediately calculated the nuclear equivalent value. The mutant power that is suspected to be energy absorption has stored the world's most wanted criminal with a terrifying nuclear equivalent. However, according to the scale of the self-detonation, this teenager can no longer survive. Well, it's pretty obvious. Iron Man Tony complained. After all, this really doesn't need to be calculated. As long as anyone with a brain sees this scene, they are basically sure that the other party has blew himself up. No, sir, there is also a very conspicuous life fluctuation in the nuclear explosion area. In less than a second, Jarvis's ruthless answer was to reward him with a slap in the face. Impossible. At this moment, even Tony, who had always been calm, stood up in shock. At the same moment, I saw a slender figure surrounded by invisible waves in the mushroom cloud that was in full view of the incident, just like an ordinary person, and walked out of the nuclear explosion. Boom. The terrifying mushroom cloud just stood on the ground, and the magnificent building that symbolized the sturdy military exploits in the past was completely smoothed out. The cloud of death hung over this area. Wan Lai was silent. But in the deadly silence, amidst this terrifying nuclear haze and explosive fireworks, a figure lingering around invisible waves just walked out of it unhurriedly. No one thought that a slender figure could walk out of the center of the nuclear explosion. Wearing a black hood, with a black bangs covering his forehead, a pair of black and white eyes are full of coldness, and there were not many emotional fluctuations under his indifferent and ruthless face. It's him. Oh my God, that self-destructed global wanted criminal is unscathed. Frightened by the radiation of the nuclear haze, citizens in the nearby area have already fled in a hurry. But after all, there are still reporters who are not afraid of death. In order to obtain first-hand information, they take the photographers directly to bring first-line reports to the world in a helicopter gunship. He earned it. The reporter who was thinking of shooting the scene of the nuclear explosion at close range did not expect to see the stock figures coming out of the nuclear explosion. It's him. It was the man who was declared as an S-class global wanted criminal by the National Defense spokesperson this morning, and was listed as an extreme mutant member of a terrorist organization. He single-handedly led the nuclear explosion, but now, he walked out of it unscathed. This is too shocking and shocking. It is reported that this Chinese teenager Su Chen just killed General Ross and his special forces in Central Park in downtown Manhattan. And now, this young man is absolutely lawless. He didn't see the law in his eyes. He even completely corroded a building in a strange way under everyone's eyes. The host held the microphone and said. The master carrying a camera even gave a close-up shot from the air, taking all the indifferent figure and face of Su Chen into it. Less than a second. The cameraman suddenly saw from the lens that the teenager who had come out of the nuclear explosion raised his head and looked at them with indifferent expression. Noisy. The blackened Su Chen has clearly heard the voice far away in the sky. Lawlessness. There is no trace of legal ethics. These harsh words strengthened Su Chen's will to revenge. Didn't they claim that they were mutant members of extreme organizations? Then as they wish. Su Chen raised his right hand, and saw a light flashing from a fingertip. In the blink of an eye, the light was completely magnified, and it instantly turned into a thick beam of light and blasted into the sky. Do not. The helicopter far out in the sky has no time to make too many evasive actions. The speed of the beam is too fast. Boom. The propeller of the entire helicopter was immediately damaged by the beam of light, and it lost its rising support. The entire helicopter fell straight toward the ground like a meteorite. Boom. Soon, an orange-red flame suddenly rose up on the ground in the distance. In such a crash, the personnel on the helicopter can't even think about surviving. At the same time, in the area in front of them, more and more military vehicles are constantly driving here. However, the soldiers who wanted to play a role in blocking the scene did not expect a survivor to be able to get out of the nuclear explosion, and they were also the initiator of everything. Everyone pays attention and fires immediately. The first batch of biochemical troops that arrived simply ignored the blockade of the scene. The enemy appeared, and in cold sweat, they immediately turned a gun at the arrogant figure. Raise your hands up immediately. The commander's subconscious habit uttered cautionary words. He always blushed. Facing such a lawless member of the extreme mutant who caused a nuclear explosion, such warning words are meaningless. Fire directly. Boom. The untidy gunfire continued to bloom, showing that everyone's mood was a little flustered. Many people who were breathing unconsciously even felt their scalp numb, and their whole body tremors non-stop. Nonsense. This is the monster that came out of the nuclear explosion unscathed. What does the bullet do? However, the soldiers who came to blockade the scene and maintain the order were also suffering in their hearts. Suddenly they encountered such a horrible situation. Under the order of the officer, they could only shoot repeatedly at the figure that was walking forward. Whoosh! One bullet pierced the air and kept hitting the front. The invisible power of thought fluctuated in front of him, blocking all the bullets in front. Following Su Chen's thought, these bullets quickly flew to the soldiers not far away in a hurry in an accelerated manner. Puff! The sound of bullets penetrating flesh and blood continued to sound. The figure of the soldier in front of him quickly fell. Suddenly, a round of cannonballs from a long-barreled cannon cart blasted in continuously, roaring loudly, and the large caliber cannonballs wrapped in a huge impact so that they continued to fall around Su Chen's body. Give me a barrage cover. Boom! One round of cannonballs enough to smash a building resounded around Su Chen one after another. The blazing flame burns, the majestic thermal impact, and the metal jet composed of countless iron pieces bloomed all around Su Chen. It stands to reason that Su Chen can completely avoid it by means of mental motivation. However, at this moment, the body that has completely released all the nuclear explosion energy in the body is empty. Su Chen needs energy from the outside to supplement it. For a while, he was lingering invisible fluctuations, just like swallowing, absorbing all the heat and kinetic energy around him, and all forms of energy were drawn in. Under such an astonishing draw, even the light was distorted. Energy use +5. Energy use +5. The built system quickly feeds back the improvement and changes in capacity. Coming. There was a shimmer in Su Chen's eyes. He directly raised both hands, and saw two luminous cannons brewing in his palm. The next moment, boom, the incomparable light cannons condensed the horrible energy beams, and thus opened a terrifying chasm on the ground, covering all the gun carts and even the soldiers in the distance, destroying and killing them. In such a short period of time, the troops that came to maintain order in the first place were completely wiped out and completely lost their organization. The satellite equipment far away in space also captured this scene very well. For this reason, the entire country directly raised the alert level to the highest level. Immediately dispatch SHIELD. Bureau. Send all the special forces. I don't care what you do, anyway, within today, I must see the tears of this extreme mutant confessing to this land, and I must have him dead without a place to be buried. The president suddenly scolded and issued the latest order. The young man who came out of the nuclear explosion so recklessly wiped out an entire biochemical force. Soon, the national alert level has been adjusted to the highest level. For the Chinese teenager Su Chen, who succeeded in the local nuclear explosion, he was directly upgraded from the S-class global wanted criminal to the SSS class. As the National Land Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau, SHIELD has also dispatched a rapid reaction force to mark Su Chen as a special dangerous level, which means that no one with the authority of a 9th level agent can read this person's information. Contact Iron Man Tony. SHIELD. Director Nick Fury immediately contacted the most popular superhero in recent times. Since Tony Stark successfully solved the troubles in his group and announced to the people around the world that he is Iron Man, this guy has become the most popular superhero. At this difficult time, the people need heroes. The people need someone to stand up. This heinous extrajudicial fanatic needs to be brought to justice, or killed quickly. After all, even the most arrogant extreme mutants in the past, the leader of the Brotherhood, and the famous Magneto were unable to achieve such a feat. Even Magneto himself was successfully arrested by military personnel and detained in an underground prison for a period of time. Under the eyes of everyone in the world, this young man was so lawless and nuclear exploded in the mainland at close range. No one could bear such a shameful shame. This boy must win. For a time, the whole country quickly sent more special personnel to Washington, D.C. Whoosh! Over the East Coast, more than a dozen Raptor fighter jets swept across the coast, moving towards the nuclear explosion site at supersonic speeds. Firepower attack is authorized. This is a flying combat team under the Atlantic 7th Force. They set off directly from the aircraft carrier far away at sea and quickly reached the battlefield. Regardless of the scarcity of numbers, just such a flying formation, its gunpowder warheads, and the rapid supersonic flight speed are enough to suppress a small country and kill 7 in and 7 out of its territory. But now, they encountered a problem. For a teenager who can survive a nuclear explosion, can their fire suppression work? They are not cleared. However, in order to contain the enemy, hold the opponent's pace, and trap him in this area is their most important task. Fire. After receiving the authorization order, the fighter pilots activated the launchers one after another. Click. Under the bomb bay of the Raptor fighter, a mounted missile device suddenly popped up. In less than a second, the tail of the missile was completely ignited and the mounting device was suddenly released. Whoosh! In this way, the missile cut through the sky and bombarded precisely at the target on the ground. Fighter. Su Chen looked up to the sky. Speaking of which, he also had a combat pilot in his childhood dreams. Looking at the approaching missiles, Su Chen's eyes suddenly became cold. With just one thought, the power fluctuations turned into an invisible giant hand, and the swift missile was held in midair by him. Middle. Boom. The whole missile was crushed by him out of thin air. But for a moment, more and more missiles flew from the end of the horizon. From a small black spot in the distance, it quickly approached and turned into a breathing warhead. That's it. Su Chen raised his right hand and gently patted to his side. Obviously shooting in the air, the seemingly meaningless action, but it has a very strange effect. I saw a missile approaching from far away skew like this, and in an instant, it completely deviated from its trajectory, and fell to the ground far away with an invisible force. Boom! The urban area of the first city was immediately greeted by its own missile bombing, many high-rise buildings collapsed, and orange flames rose. The driver cursed secretly. They also didn't expect the other party's weird power abilities to be able to get all the missiles that attacked in the future so easily. This will only increase innocent casualties. Delay for half a minute, and then all will return. Sending out such a flying formation had no intention of destroying this young man. The original intention at the beginning was only to delay the opponent, relying on the advantage of high altitude, and even the supersonic flight speed. There is no need to worry too much about the enemy's attack from the ground. But their ideas are still a bit too simple. When multiple Raptor fighters finished firing their missiles and whizzed past the area above Su Chen's head, the sound of the engine starting resounding through the sky made the indifferent boy frown. At the first time, he did not have much to deal with fighters. Because it's too fast, it's too high. Of course, the other party has no means to check and balance himself at all. But it's still too noisy. Su Chen's indifferent face showed a trace of killing intent, and he couldn't bear the sound of the supersonic engine roaring back and forth in the air in his ears. This made his mood a bit bad. As the saying goes, blackening is 10 times stronger, and whitening is weaker by 3 points. When Su Chen's mood was completely reversed and he embraced the abyss, he became more comfortable with the use of abilities. Let them fall. It's like saying what you say. An invisible wave of power began to interfere with reality. After Su Chen in the darkened state became a little irritable, this ethereal and invisible force immediately acted on the reality, directly altering the reality. There are always people in this world who are curious about how to modify reality. Someone has put forward a good answer, that is, to modify the probability that nature already exists. For example, the engine device of a fighter jet has a malfunction, even if the probability is very small under maintenance. But this indifferent and ruthless boy is like a god, throwing probability dice, leading the realistic answer to the worst situation. Ever since. No, why did the fighter's engine suddenly fail? At least, at the same time, multiple fighter pilots made desperate calls. Under an invisible force, they just ushered in the worst ending. The fighter's dual-ring engine all failed at the same time and could not be started. For a time, an expensive Raptor fighter jet fell towards the ground in this way, and within a few seconds, there was a loud explosion in the city and even on the sea, and the orange-red flames completely bloomed. Still not skilled enough. Su Chen glanced at only half of the fighters left in the air. It was obvious that the almost insoluble reality tampering just now did not fully take effect on all fighters. But he is not depressed, because this ability is really unsolvable in BUG. Even if he has a lot of experience now, it will take some time to fully grasp it. Retreat. Retreat now. The pilot of the Raptor fighter suddenly shouted. For unknown reasons, the 6 fighter jets flying high in the air encountered the problem of engine failure at the same time and fell directly to the surface. The incident happened hastily, but 3 people did not eject out of the cabin in time. But even so, these drivers who floated in the air on parachutes did not usher in the end of death. What? Such a slowly floating target unit, a surging thought force fluctuations directly emerged, as if an invisible giant hand was completely held together. Boom! A blood mist bloomed. Su Chen didn't even need to use too much force, just gently poked the opponent's parachute, and directly gave the opponent a vertical acceleration landing package. The rest of the fighter jets who managed to escape from the dead did not dare to turn their heads at all, so they flew back towards the distant sea carrier. Amazingly, the inexplicable crash caused them to cry out in a cold sweat. This is certainly not an accident. It must be caused by the teenager who walked out of the nuclear explosion. Sir, maybe the enemy you were about to face has some kind of magical skills. Jarvis, this is not in line with your usual rigorous speaking logic. Tony Stark soared in the air wearing the latest Mark armor. From the Stark Group building in Manhattan to Washington, D.C., he could easily reach it in less than a minute. Through satellite equipment in low Earth orbit, Jarvis, an artificial intelligence, is monitoring the teenager at the place of the incident in real time. However, after the pursuit incident was triggered, even the rigorous and scientific Jarvis system could not argue why this was. It's as if it caused an inexplicable crash after the other party was irritated. Hey guy, Tony laughed a little after hearing this. When you say this, I thought the other party was a god. When I get angry, the world will fall apart. Jarvis continued to respond without any mood swings. The disaster like the collapse of the sky and the earth can still be seen, but there was no obvious sign of energy in the crash just now, and it made the engine completely malfunction invisibly. The underlying code of artificial intelligence is about logic. Now, encountering an attack that interferes with reality, it is indeed a little confused. Invisible and without a trace, all forms of energy from the outside world cannot be detected, which adds a huge problem to Jarvis. We have 5 seconds to reach the battlefield. Jarvis issued a reminder. The Mark armor driven by a micro-reactor, when in flight, is much faster than the previous Raptor fighter. Soon, the gorgeous gold-red suit just flew all the way over the city of Washington, D.C. Wow, it's Iron Man. He is finally here. I love you, Tony Stark. Iron Man. Forever. For a time, the people of the city on the ground suddenly shouted. From his birth to the open exposure of his identity, the arrogant and confident Iron Man has been the most popular superhero. Many children ran out of the house wearing clothes with Iron Man logo printed on them, raising their hands high, and shouting to Tony, who was soaring in the air. Jarvis, do you want to help me test how loud the cheers of the citizens are? By the way, help me test the happiness index of the citizens. Even on the battlefield, Tony is still so humorous. Jarvis was accustomed to his own master style, but did not respond, reflecting the performance of high intelligence. Okay, back to the topic. Tony's look under the mask immediately became serious. Whoosh, his figure slanted across the mushroom cloud area created by the nuclear explosion. With the help of the nuclear haze, he immediately ejected a miniature missile from the position of the magazine on his shoulder. Like the bees coming out of a honeycomb, a bunch of miniature missiles passed through the smoke as vast as the rain, and all flew towards the target on the ground. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the ground seemed to be bombarded by a group army. The ground broke apart, and orange-red explosions and fireworks raged up. Sir, thermal energy, kinetic energy, and all impact energy are rapidly disappearing. Through Tony's bird's-eye view from the air, you can immediately see that the fireworks on the ground begin to dissipate quickly. Just like looking back in time, the surging fireworks and even the impact of explosions quickly disappear without a trace. Sure enough, the other party's energy index has exponentially skyrocketed. It has been determined that this teenager has the ability to absorb and release external energy. Please deal with it carefully, sir. This temptation also strengthened Tony's idea. As a high IQ genius, one naturally thinks of how the other party brought the energy of a nuclear explosion to the National Defense Headquarters and detonated it, and the use of energy is the best answer. This mutant seems to have a lot of abilities. In this way, Tony felt a little tricky. In addition to the motivation to read just now, there is also an inexplicable and strange ability. The young man in front of him has at least 3 abilities. When did mutants have so many unmatched abilities? But there is a big exclamation point in my mind. That's how the other party absorbed the nuclear explosion. After all, that is something that the country strictly controls, and ordinary people can't reach it at all. We have successfully cracked the National Defense Database by brute force through a background program. Jarvis, who had a good heart, set out to arrange this wisely and naturally. This is easy for Tony, who has perfect hacking skills. In addition, many of the security facilities of defense agencies are built by Howard, and it is very natural to leave a back door in secret. This investigation made Tony feel a little speechless. Unexpectedly, this turned out to be a child who had escaped from a large laboratory and almost turned into a mouse for human experiments. Obviously, the official identities of the extreme mutants previously announced are obviously fabricated. Tony was speechless. For these military representatives, he had long been upset, and he did not expect that this tragedy was still indirectly brewed. No matter what, this boy still went the wrong way after all. The bombing of the National Defense Headquarters has become an established fact. In any case, the boy must give an explanation. Arrests are the least. Most. The death penalty is exempt. Tony took a deep breath, softened his inner guilt a little, and then immediately called out Jarvis. Afterwards, I will offer to hire the best lawyer. But, now activate the family party plan for me, and give this teenager a curtain call for the final party. Iron Man Tony's family party plan is officially launched. Through the remote operation of artificial intelligence Jarvis, the Mark armors placed in the Stark Industrial Building have already activated themselves. Whoosh! In an instant, more than 20 steel robots soared in the air, skimmed over the ground, and flew directly toward the nuclear explosion area. Lively and full of excitement, this is Tony Stark's family party plan. It was also the curtain call for the last party that he gave to Su Chen in front of him. Since the target absorbs external energy, it can only bind him, imprison him, and not give him a chance to absorb any energy. Plan B begins. At this time, the people in the urban area saw so many steel robots coming through the air at a glance, and the cheers grew louder and louder. There are a large number of steel suits with various color coatings soaring, which naturally attracted most people's attention. After all, this is the first time that Tony has exposed other types of Mark suits to the public's perspective. Superhero Iron Man. Su Chen naturally knew his origins for the golden red steel suit that flew in the air. Speaking of, when he was a child, he was very envious of the existence of superheroes. After all, everyone has the heart to act as a hero. Ironically, he is now a supervillain. In order to deal with him, the Iron Man even took out his whole cards. Boom! In an instant, two black-coated steel suits flew from the left and right sides of the field of view. Driven by the micro-reactor, the speed faster than the supersonic speed actually made Su Chen's dynamic vision all of a sudden. Can't keep up. Boom! A sense of impact that was enough to smash the ground came head-on. Su Chen was expressionless. Like a rock coming from a stormy sea, his figure standing on the ground didn't move at all. Under the baptism of the nuclear explosion, his terrifying physique had already been tempered for thousands of years, and the impact of supersonic speed was nothing. Dynamic vision +10. Dynamic vision +10. The constructed system once again continuously displays the information of evolution. Su Chen's face was cold, a surging thought power fluctuation burst out of his mind. In the blink of an eye, the two steel robots that came by assault were rejected by a terrifying force, and they flew out 100 meters away. And this time, in the field of vision in front of him, several steel battle suits fell on the ground so steadily. Mark Armor -24 feet heavy tank. As the name suggests, the Mark armor of the heavy tank model is very cumbersome and tall, and the visual effect is even more bloated, without any aesthetic feeling. Tony designed such a heavy combat suit to deal with Hulk. But now, in order to completely imprison Su Chen who can absorb energy, he has to move him out. Boom! When the heavy robot with a height of nearly 3 meters in front of them was moving, the ground trembled. Soon, these cumbersome guys immediately accelerated and ran towards Su Chen. Su Chen frowned because he inexplicably felt an enemy behind him. This seems to be the ability of an infinitely evolving mutant gene to be newly generated in recent days. Predict the enemy's attack trend. Godlike intuition. Battle intuition. At least the built system displays it like this. Su Chen has something to understand. Sure enough, as conveyed by the intuition of battle, there was no trace of the back area, and there was no fluctuation in the presence of it. A steel suit was unexpectedly ushered in inexplicably. Mark Armor 15, sneaky. The invisible person under the family party package is perfectly adapted to covert assassinations, anti-radar, anti-energy detection and other means. Click. At least at this moment, this sneaky steel robot, who came close without a trace, just hugged Su Chen with a pair of steel arms around his waist. At this time, multiple heavy tank Mark robots have also rushed to the front. They directly hugged Su Chen's arms with their bloated and heavy metal arms. "Little devil, enough is enough." Iron Man Tony's voice came from the robot in front of him. There are more than a dozen Mark steel robots of various types flying high in the sky. In order to avoid giving a little bit of energy to opponents who can absorb energy, Tony relies on pure close confinement and prepares to take him to a prison of his own. "That's it," Su Chen sneered. "What?" in Tony's incredulous tone. Su Chen's hands were held backhands like this, his right hand grasped a mechanical arm, and he didn't see how hard he was. The whole metal armor that could resist the baptism of artillery shells was just scratched by his abrupt hand. With a gush of strength, Su Chen grabbed one of the arms of the heavy tank in front of him with one hand. "Are you kidding? Even these tatters dare to imprison me?" Before that, Su Chen, who had never shown his physical advantage, began to show off his power. The right hand, who had lost its confinement, squeezed a fist suddenly. Whoosh! With a punch, there was a sonic boom in the air. The 13-year-old boy's fist was wrapped in majestic and terrifying power, and it smashed the head of the heavy tank in front of him. "Ho!" Su Chen roared and shook his whole body. The surging energy fluctuations surged out of his body, and the sneaky robot that hugged him around the waist was blasted out from behind. The last remaining heavy tank robot suddenly activated its thrusters at this moment, trying to drive Su Chen in front of it to fly out of the land. Humph! Su Chen gave a cold snort. After being taken away for more than 10 meters, his feet stood firmly in the air under the influence of Nian motive. Then he clenched his fists and moved towards the head of the bloated and bulky robot. Fist went. Boom! An unpretentious fist, even a fist without a trace of combat training, shattered the head of the robot in such a brutal and incomprehensible manner. This moment, Tony looked silly. The Plan B project has officially failed. The opponent has an indissoluble physique. It has not yet been analyzed how the opponent has so many abilities. Jarvis's words without any emotional fluctuations deeply hit Tony's heart. What should I do now? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.